What's up, Chaos Shinobi here. If you enjoy the story, like and subscribe so I can make more awesome videos for you guys. Chapter 1. Time. A distorted, albeit distinctly gruff voice, belonging to a shadow-covered individual, asked another similarly garbed person. 3 hours. The answer was nothing more than a quip. The voice muffled and distorted pretty much the same way the first was. Numbers? As if in a contest to show who was the less loquacious, the first individual asked a single-word question again. 5 squads, 17 casualties. He allowed the chase to end. Nonplussed, the other shadow gave its report to its officer. Silence wrapped the little room the two people were in. Part surprise, part uncomfortable, and full embarrassment at the results. The first shadow, seated behind a desk, laced its fingers under its masked visage, resting its chin on their hands. He is wasted. The other shadow, standing, shrugged under its cloak as if signifying it was not their call to agree or not permission to talk freely. The standing shadow started minutely. It took a minute to collect itself and its thoughts. Humming lightly under its mask, he had been the prime observer of the target for a long while and was intent on giving the commander a clear picture. There was no need to point the good. The report was telling. It did not mean the bad was not present. He is undisciplined. If they did not know the commander never ever snorted, the shadow would have sworn the seated officer just had. He is loud and brash. The commander shrugged and waved a hand, inviting the soldier to continue. The first 2 points were of no consequence. They had all lacked discipline at first, and young boys tended to be loud and brash anyway. The first could be punched in and the second could be punched out. There was nothing a good thrashing could not achieve. He wears orange. The commander stilled. That was a good point. An excellent point even. One that further proved the boy's sheer talent and ingenuity. One did not escape 20 Chunin level ninja for 3 hours and caused 13 virtual casualties while wearing bright neon orange by being a dunce. The commander smiled behind its mask. Exactly. Naruto Uzumaki, a short, blue-eyed, blonde boy who would be unremarkable if it weren't for the whisker-like marks on his cheeks and his orange garment, was known throughout Konohagakure, the village hidden in the leaves, by many names. For the greater part of the scarce non-shinobi population, he was that boy. It was often sworn like an expletive. Some people even signed themselves after saying it, or whispered with extreme distaste. For the smaller part left, it was as if he were not even there. The only two people Naruto knew who said his name, his real name, with a touch of affection were the old cook of the ramen stand and his daughter, Tuki and Amakiraku. For the shinobi inhabitants, who were making up most of Konoha's population, they either treated him like they would a primed high-yield explosive tag, with a mix of fear, caution and anger, or conscientiously ignored him. They did not really give him a name, but it was not much better. There was only one person who looked at him and smiled and even sometimes hugged him, proving that he was indeed not a primed high-yield explosive tag. But this person was the Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, leader of Konohagakure, and as such, the kindly old man rarely had time for Naruto. As for the children his age, or at least those he frequented because of school, whether they were from shinobi clans or from a civilian ascent, they called him dead last and absolutely refused to hang out with him. It hurt. First, because as much as it was technically true he was the dead last of his class, it was certainly not for a lack of trying. But while every other student were given help when they requested it, Naruto was not. The teachers, all Chunin in their own right, were like all the ninja in the village. They ignored him or glared at him, but they certainly never helped him. Second, because he could not understand what he had ever done to them all that they refused to be his friends. Certainly, there were Kiba Inuzuka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akimaki who occasionally skipped class with him, but Naruto was not sure they were friends. Of the 3 boys, none had ever invited him home, to a birthday party, or to do schoolwork together. And Naruto had never extended the invitation either, because he lived in a miserable place he could barely afford, and he certainly did not want anyone to find out he lived in what some would consider a ruin. Choji would not laugh, but Naruto was sure the portly Akimaki would think no less. Shikamaru would have the sideways smirk the pineapple-haired boy had when he was amused, and Kiba would not even pretend and laugh. Showing the boys his place was simply out of the question. Not like they would accept an invitation in the first place. So Naruto Uzumaki, that boy, the dobe, the friendless, was known by many a nickname, and for what reason he did not even know. But his all-time favorite was the one people tended to bellow after him just as he committed a prank. It was a loud, distorted, angry shout that vaguely resembled the word brat. Yes, when people could not afford to ignore him, because he had dyed their underwears pink, sprinkled paillette in their food, swapped their wares, drawn smiley faces on their doors, or anything else he could think of. They called him. They ran after him. They screamed his last name. When Naruto committed a prank, he had the villagers' full attention. The best part was when the ninja started to run after him. Civilians could not keep up, but Ninja totally could. So the boy did his best so that his pranks had repercussions on Chunin or Jonin. The higher level ninja would enrage, having their combat fatigues turned jade blue, turquoise green, or sakura pink, and would chase him in what Naruto liked to think was a game of tag. No one had ever wanted to play tag with him, so the boy made do. And even if the players were not all consenting, it was all harmless fun in the end. And Naruto liked to run. He was quick for his age, the quickest, and he could run for hours. There was nothing quite like the wind shuffling his blonde, spiky locks like a loving hand and making his azure blue eyes water. There was nothing quite like slaloming through Konoha's back alleys, jumping, somersaulting, and rolling in a mad parkour race. Running at breakneck speed was the only way he felt alive, the only way he felt here, the only way he felt now. Just this very morning, Naruto had realized his masterpiece, the prank of all pranks, the prankiest of his stunts ever. He had arisen at 3 in the morning, donned his orange jumpsuit, and darted on top of the Hokage monument where he had patiently hauled various supplies needed for his project over the course of a month, setting up a complex system of ropes to rappel down the cliff, sculpted to the effigies of the 4 Hokage, past and present. Naruto had then taken a various brush and paint cans and had proceeded to redesign the 4 faces of the village's honored leaders. Dawn had come quickly, but Naruto, garbed in the exact tint of orange needed to blend in with the ochre cliff, had escaped vigilance. 1 hour later, his work finished and the last touch added, the blonde child had climbed up, set his repelling gear aside, and screamed a very loud "Good morning Konoha" at the top of his lungs. The ensuing chase had mobilized 20 or so Chunin and lasted 3 hours as Naruto led them through an obstacle course he had prepared for a month and a half now. It had been absolutely thrilling for the blonde. Eventually, he had allowed Iruka Umino, 1 Chunin from the academy and the only teacher who paid him attention, to catch him. He had run the entirety of his planned obstacle course anyway. All this merry, in the blonde's honest opinion anyway, game of tag led to Naruto's current situation. The boy was washing the painted, stony faces of the Hokage. The blonde, far from the complete idiot people thought him to be, had fortunately gotten water-diluted paint, and was simply throwing buckets of water at his giant doodles, while hanging from his repelling setup. Taken by thoughts of delicious ramen, the fascinating angles of the rock he was bouncing off of, and the shiny rainbow-white spume of the soapy water, the blonde nearly could not hear his sensei's sigh as the content of another bucket splashed against the rock. Naruto! The blonde looked up, balancing at the end of his rope like some sort of pendulum, a wide smile on his face. The wind was playing with Iruka's ponytail and it was fluttering in random patterns. "Yes, sensei." "Why would you do it, Naruto?" The bright smile faltered and the blonde ceased his balancing. He could hear the disappointment in the teacher's voice. Naruto sighed, but Iruka spoke before he could answer. "You know how important this monument is, Naruto, so why?" The blonde knew Iruka enough to know that Chunin would not be satisfied unless given a straight answer. "It's the only way they look at me," said the blonde in a subdued voice, barely above a murmur, his blue eyes darting away from the Chunin. Iruka sighed again, louder this time, rubbing his eyes with his right hand before massaging the large, horizontal scar across his face absent-mindedly. "There are other ways, Naruto," the ninja instructor began in a tired tone. "You could show them how clever and hardworking you are, but all you do is goof around." It sounded like a broken record to Naruto's ears. "But I'm trying, sensei. I do my best," the blonde exclaimed in protest. He did try. Not all subjects held his interest equally, that would be lying, but Naruto did try to perform adequately in all. Was it his fault no one, save Iruka, would answer his question? Was it his fault he was excluded from class for the slightest offense? Was it his fault he found geography dry and dusty because the old maps definitely were so? Was it his fault he found chemistry tedious? Was it his fault he could not follow the teacher's agonizingly slow lessons because following a dragonfly's wings' incredibly fast motions was much more interesting? If you did your best, you'd get the clone jutsu right, the teacher exclaimed in response. Too fast, and winced. Naruto hung from his rope lamely, head down, his features set in a scowl to avoid the tears to show. I'm sorry Naruto, but I'm worried. The exam is in 2 days and you still don't have it, Iruka said, voice wavering slightly from anguish. The teacher sat with a sigh, his legs dangling above the fourth Hokage's forehead. I want you to pass Naruto, but the Academy 3 are required. The blonde nodded sadly. I know sensei, I know, but whatever I do, I can get it. Once again, the brown-haired Chunin sighed. The why was a mystery, but the blonde could not get the clone jutsu. Of the Academy 3, the clone jutsu was maybe the most complicated, but it was incomprehensible for Naruto to not manage it. The blonde had the substitution jutsu down to a pat. His transformation was a bit shaky but passable. Yet the clone, which was technically demanding but not much more than the transformation, was impossible for Naruto. And while a certain average mark on theoretical materials was required, one Iruka had no doubt the blonde would manage. The Academy 3 were an absolute requirement. The students were training to be ninjas. If they could not do the simplest of ninjutsu, demonstrate correct taijutsu, and show they could escape a genjutsu, if not we've won, they would not graduate. Once again, Iruka caught himself scratching his old scar. Looking back at the downtrodden Naruto, the teacher managed a weak smile. Look Naruto, how about you finish this and we grab some ramen, my treat, offered the Chunin, knowing full well he had just put his wallet at risk. Immediately, the blonde's head shot up, his azure eyes shining as he looked at Iruka with a blinding smile, his previous worry pushed in a corner of his mind. Ramen, the blonde exclaimed before enthusiastically returning to his cleaning work. There is absolutely no way. Hiruzen Sarutobi, reinstated third Hokage of Konoha, said firmly to his cloaked, masked interlocutor, with all the might his 60 years old, war veteran frame could muster, and the so-called professor could muster a lot of might. He will go to waste, insisted the cloaked individual behind the white porcelain of a mask. The complete face protection was in the likeness of a dragon, with 3 red fang-like markings on its forehead. The mask was the tell of an Anbu member, and the markings identified the figure as the Takashi Gun Taisho, the general of the special force. He will have a normal team and learn normally, just like he was supposed to have a normal childhood. The masked individual interrupted the cage, their distorted voice cutting through the old man's answer. I will not listen to your recriminations, said the Hokage, his tone uncommanding. I followed the will of a dying, delirious man, and you will listen to my recriminations. Hiruzen, you made mistakes, many, not all of the same gravity, but it is time you admit to it and handle the fallout. I offer you a way out of it. There is no reason for him to join. There is no need to put him through this grinder. How much more time will you coddle him? How much more time will you hide the truth from him? We are ninja, Hiruzen, the figure exclaimed, twitching slightly, his raised tone the only mark of his agitation. Or are you too cowardly? Is that it? Will you wait for your successor to break him? The new killing intent exploded and drowned the office, bending the floor and cracking the large pane of glass behind the old man's desk. Watch your tongue, dragon. You are talking to your Hokage, bid Hiruzen in an ice-cold voice. Then assume this damned hat and the responsibilities that go with it. The answer was equally cold. Do you think you are the only one too old for your job? This mask is just as heavy. An uneasy silence blanketed the room and the Hokage could only palm his face in weariness. Forgive me, dragon. Hiruzen sighed. Still, I see no reason for the boy to join the corps. What is your plan for him? The classic balance, utter Jonin Hotake. Your officers are definitely out their mind. Have you even looked at the profiling? The Hokage took a breath in. No. Dragon resisted the urge to slap his forehead. The mask was quite resistant. It would hurt needlessly. It is a disaster waiting to happen. He definitely won't fit, and Hotake's own situation will probably make it worse. No, Hiruzen. It's a sad plan and it's going to fail. Anbu is not a way to begin your ninja career normally. The figure threw his arms in the air. He will never live normally, Hiruzen. You need to accept that. He did not have a normal childhood and he certainly won't have a normal ninja career. Now, your decision already made is infancy a living hell. Do you want to do the same with his ninja life? The Hokage released the breath he had been holding and his shoulders sagged under his white robes. Anbu will warp him. Being a ninja will warp him, Hiruzen. Now you must decide if it will also kill him or not. You will not let this issue go, am I right? Absolutely not, Hiruzen. He has too much potential. He has too much potential. You will not use him, dragon. Oh, by the flame, Hiruzen. I know you love the kid. Hell, he is pretty likable. But that does not change what he contains. We never had to funnel them through Anbu before. Even behind the mask, Hiruzen could feel the deadpan look the figure was giving him because the first was already an accomplished ninja and the second status was actually a secret. Hiruzen, this discussion is over. I am taking the boy. If you still protest, I will make use of very tiresome legalese and reveal some secrets to have my way. It will give you paperwork and I'll still have him. The masked individual stated in a tone that was final. Do we make this the easy or the hard way? Hiruzen paled. Whether it was at the threat of secrets being revealed or supplementary paperwork added to the pile, none could tell, and sighed. The easy way, the old man said, distraught. The dragon-masked figure nodded and gave his Hokugin a roll so powerful, the old man could hear it. By the flame, don't treat like he is already dead, Hiruzen. I'll make sure he'll visit you. And if you desire, he'll have a certain talk with you. Naruto was sitting on the swing in the courtyard of the academy. He had failed for the third time. He had failed the test. He knew he was not at the top of his class but his marks on the written tests were fine. He had not the best taijutsu. His was a deformation of the floating leaf style, the result of ingrained bad habits no one had corrected. His on-the-fly genjutsu was mediocre but he could get out of a C-ranked illusion. His shuriken jutsu was actually passable and would be better if not for the ruin knives he used. Hell, he could make his own storage in exploding seals if he had the required chakra paper and he was pretty sure he was the only one capable of that among his classmates. But the truth of the matter was that, despite his best efforts, he could not make a damned clone. He knew the theory, had practiced for hours on end. Yet when he reached for the fractional amount of necessary chakra, the life energy coursing his pathway system would prove to be indomitable. His chakra simply could not be manipulated in such a minute quantity. Despite the agonizing hours spent on the leaf-loading exercise, his control had not been enough. The blonde eyed his joyous ex-classmates he mentally amended celebrating with their family, showing off their gleaming headband, none sparing a single glance at him. His keen ears picked the satisfied grunt of many parents, happy that that boy was not becoming a shinobi. Distractedly, Naruto felt tears rolling down his cheeks. His whiskered cheeks. Not for the first time, he wondered if those whisker-like marks were the reason he could not graduate. The boy wiped the tears away. Dwelling on his failure would not accomplish anything. He could not pass this year, he would try against the next. He had sworn he would become Hokage, and he needed to be a ninja first for that. Hopping down the swing, the blonde brandished his right hand in front of him, finger tightened in a fist and screamed, "I'll do it! I swear I'll become a ninja!" Tabeo. Well, that's dedication. Naruto nearly jumped out of his skin and whirled around. In front of him was a white-haired Chunin, a bandana on his head. "Mizuki-sensei?" The man smiled. "Tell me, Naruto, how would you like a shot at the makeup test?" The blonde gave the teacher a puzzled look before the words made it home. Hope, shy and wobbly but hope nonetheless, shone in the azure eyes. "Makeup test?" Mizuki smiled larger. All according to plan. A shadow darted from rooftop to rooftop, invisible in the dark cover provided by the moonless night. It stopped for a second when it reached the mass of the Hokage Tower. The tower was a round building, painted in red, flanked by two smaller buildings of the same fashion. It was actually shorter than the blue-top broadcast station that stood next to it like an erect finger. Steadying its breathing, the shadow counted wordlessly. At some signal only they were privy to, the figure sprinted and jumped, latching itself to a gutter running along the wall of the broadcast station. Like some otherworldly cat, the shadow climbed up, using the tiniest holes in between the white bricks that made the wall. With careful grace, the shadow reached the blue roof. It was a pointy-wood construct, looking much like a witch's hat, with a strange sphere on top. The shadow kept climbing until it was in the middle of the roof. Slowly, the individual took a length of rope and tied it solidly to one of the protruding beams of the blue roof. Glancing at its target, the flat roof of one of the secondary tower, the shadow smiled widely. "This is completely crazy," whispered the individual, the vibrato of excitement clear for all to hear. "Meaning no one, at this hour of the night." The shadow shuddered. It had one try and one try only. A miss was a surefire way to end in the hospital at best. Circling around the pointy roof, the shadow inhaled deeply and started to run down and back toward the Hokage Tower. The maths had proven that, in theory, the pendulum movement would allow the shadow to reach one of the secondary tower. The critical part was the speed, but the individual was confident. Running fast was their game. At breakneck speed, wine whistling in its hair, the rope unrolling behind, the shadow ran on an oblique trajectory on the station's wall and suddenly jumped. The rope whizzed as the shadow fell, gravity taking what was her by right. The pendulum movement began as the rope was stretched to the max, The beam it was anchored to whining slightly. The figure was catapulted up by its momentum and suddenly, the individual felt weightless. It was at this point they cut the harness. Naruto fell like an anvil and with a grunt, impacted the tiled roof of the northern secondary tower none too gently. Breaking the shock the best he could with a roll, the cloaked blonde ended his course in the ornamental bushes that crowned the outer ridge of the tower. Oh, Naruto muttered, as low as he could, wary of the potential guard. He knew, according to the paper Mizuki had given him, that he should be right between rotation, but still, the goal was to go unnoticed. The blonde took a second to dust himself. His black shirt was in tatter and his navy blue pants were torn at the knee. He had multiple cuts, the entire right side of his body hurt, and his left ankle was probably sprained, but extraordinarily, he was fine. Naruto checked his various pockets to check everything was still where it was supposed to be and nodded to himself. The rush had been great, the fall thrilling, and the second of weightlessness amazing, but he was not doing that again ever. Naruto Uzumaki was a daredevil alright, but that had been suicidal. In retrospect, the best entry possible, hell, the best entry ever, as the rooftops were rarely patrolled, but still, it had been a close call. From the roof he was on, climbing on the main tower was a piece of cake. The first and second levels of each tower were protected so that it was virtually impossible to climb them, regardless of the technique. The third level was the same, but the problem was nullified by various pipes and large cables running around the circumference of the tower. Naruto had no idea of their purpose, but right now, they made perfect holds to climb from one roof to another. Taking a second to breathe, Naruto entered the tower. The easy part was done. Fortunately, he was used to infiltrating the Hokage Tower for his pranks. The blonde knew the best hidey holes, navigating the corridors and hiding from the patrolling pairs of Chunin, with the occasional Jonin, was boringly easy, and Naruto was quick to make it to his goal. The vault was sealed shut obviously, but as a prankster, the blonde knew how to pick the toughest lock. Naruto fished in his pocket and retrieved one of his best invention, something he was especially proud of. In his right hand, the blonde was holding a scroll that he promptly unrolled in front of the door. Holding his hands in a ram seal, the blonde stepped on the scroll and whispered, "Fwin." Sensory mirror wall. The air shimmered around the blonde and shifted. Now, Naruto had exactly 4 minutes to pick one of the most difficult lock, hidden by a genjutsu-like barrier finjutsu of his own making. Let's open you up. 3 minutes and 40 seconds and one absolutely oblivious patrol later, the vault opened. Naruto gasped more than he knew for certain, that he had probably triggered a finjutsu-based alarm, but he could not do much about it. If there was finjutsu somewhere, it was too high level for him to detect it. Losing no time, as it was now more than ever a scarce resource, Naruto stepped inside the fortified chamber and fastened a large and fat scroll on his back before darting out. Folding his left hand in a half-tiger seal, the blonde muttered a katsu. The scroll he had been standing on was reduced to ash just as several firework fuses burned out, launching their payload in the sky and illuminating Konoha. If the entry had required some imagination, the exit was easier. Naruto simply dangled a rope from a window of the second floor and glided down while the patrolling guards were occupied with either his fireworks or the alarm at the vault. Hiruzen Sarutobi was having a peaceful night when he was awakened by a burning sensation. The old ninja woke up immediately. Years of combat did that to a man, but searched a second for the reason of his awakening. His heart grew cold when he realized it was the tattoo signaling a breach of the vault that was heating up. Just as he considered the implication of such a thing happening, fireworks illuminated the sky of Konoha. The old cage swore under his breath. Naruto skidded to a halt in a clearing. Konoha bore its name because of the dense forests out and inside its walls, and the blonde was currently enjoying the relative security of a grove which would hopefully mask him to the soon-to-be pursuing shinobi. He had not run far nor wide. The closer you are to your enemies, the safer you are after all. Naruto was inside Konoha proper, far enough from the tower to not be caught during the first sweep, but close enough that the ninja would look for the intruder outside first before eventually finding him. His position was the logical last option in the search order. The blonde opened the large scroll. He had approximately 1 hour to learn the jutsu, after which, Mizuki-sensei would allow him to graduate. The lingering light of the fireworks made it unnecessary for the blonde to use a torchlight, something he had counted on. A torchlight was not very discreet after all. Shadow clone jutsu, muttered Naruto before deflating. A clone technique when he could not even perform the basic one. No way. Reading further, the blonde lay eyes on techniques either too horrible to be learned or way too complicated. After 5 minutes of exploring the scroll, The blonde sighed. Shadow clone it is. Naruto was sprawled, eagle spread, on the ground and the boy was panting hard. The clone jutsu required him to rein in a small amount of energy and shape it in his image. The needed quantity was too small for the thundering flow of the blonde's chakra. The shadow clone jutsu was the same but different. The amount of chakra was not a problem. On the very contrary, the shadow clone needed the caster to mold a huge amount of life energy and project it in the shape of the user. The problem that stumped Naruto right now was the fact that a large part of the chakra was supposed to fill the shape. The goal was to achieve a solid clone made of pure chakra. The blonde had read about solid clone in a book about chakra theory. Usually, ninja would use earth or water as a putty of a sort and mold it with chakra to create what was commonly called an elemental clone. The required amount was substantially higher than for a standard clone but nowhere near the quantity required for a shadow clone. Naruto suddenly blinked. Maybe he had to think of the problem like he would an elemental clone. Right now, he was trying to picture an empty shell that he had to fill up with chakra, but that was maybe not the way. If he first expulsed as much chakra as possible and then shaped it like a sculpture of sort, maybe it would work. The blonde broke his musing and nodded resolutely. He had wasted enough time, the hour was coming to a close. Deciding to test his new theory, the boy made a cross-shaped hand sign. Carefully, the blonde proceeded to join his physical and spiritual energies, creating chakra, in a process called merging, and pulsed the chakra through his hands. The specific cross-like shape was supposed to alter the properties of his chakra, much like standard hand signs. In a process called molding. It had something to do with yang chakra but Naruto was not certain what it was. Focusing, the boy merged as much chakra as he could, modifying it through the hand sign, and storing it back in his hara. It was difficult to merge fresh chakra while keeping the molded, ready-to-use energy on the side, so to speak, but Naruto managed. After a minute, satisfied with the amount he had, Naruto took a deep breath before exhaling. Alright. Now to get it out, the blonde muttered. Pushing all the molded chakra through his hand one last time, the blonde pulsed it all out from the tenketsu in his palms. With sweat pouring from his brow, Naruto focused on sculpting the sea of chakra that was surrounding him into a replica of himself. Head, limbs, hair, fingers, eyes, torso, clothes. Shadow clone jutsu, roared the blonde, eyes shut in concentration. Only silence answered him. Tentatively, the boy opened one eye, only for the second to shoot open at the sight that greeted him. In front of Naruto was Naruto. With a shaky hand, the blonde poked his doppelganger's cheek and was elated when the clone grinned but did not disappear. Yada! Bellowed the blonde while dancing around and with his replica. I did it! I did it! I did it! I did it! Answered the clone, feeling every last bit of joy the original felt. We did it! We did it! Chorused the duo, a grin brighter than the sun splitting both faces. Naruto! The shout was so powerful. The duo of blonde tripped and fell, the clone hitting his head on a small rock jutting out of the ground and dispelling in a cloud of smoke. Distractedly, the original noticed he had a sudden urge to rub the side of his head. The blonde turned toward the origin of the shout to see Iruka, his head several times bigger than normal and slowly reverting to its original size. Hey, Iruka-sensei, the blonde said, rubbing the back of his head. What is happening, Naruto? Why? Iruka trailed off as his eyes took the sight of his pupil. The blonde looked exhausted and as if he had just fought with a pack of wolves. But more urgent was the large, fat, and terribly open scroll near the blonde. Oh no! The teacher's tone immediately alerted Naruto something was wrong, very wrong. Getting back up, the blonde walked carefully toward Iruka. Sensei? What? He was silenced by the harshest glare Iruka had ever sent his way. Naruto flinched and recoiled. Do you have any idea what you have done? This is the forbidden scroll, Naruto. What got into you? The teacher hurled with anger and worry. Naruto felt his eyes water. Iruka had never been that angry with him. Sure, the teacher had been exasperated 1 or 2 times but never to this extent. And all the same, Iruka had never been that worried. What? But Mizuki-sensei said. Mizuki? Iruka questioned suddenly, interrupting Naruto. The blonde nodded and the puzzle pieces fell into place. It was Mizuki who had rung the alert, saying he had seen Naruto flee with the forbidden scroll. Mizuki, who had no business being anywhere near the Hokage Tower tonight. Mizuki, your average chunin, who had somehow seen Naruto when the multiple guards of the tower had not. Mizuki, who, the last time Iruka had seen him, was geared like he was going to war. Iruka sprung and tackled Naruto just as a circle of steel embedded itself where the blonde was standing a second ago. Ah! Iruka, a familiar voice rang into the clearing. You found him before me. A strange, high-pitched grating sound was heard. Sensei, what is happening? Naruto asked, trembling. Iruka steeled himself. Naruto, this is an order. The Chunin jumped again, hauling the boy with him as another whistling chakram toward the earth on their last position. You take this scroll and you run to the tower. The Chunin whirled and hid behind a tree, the trunk shielding him and his charge from a third circle of death. Are we clear? Naruto could only nod, too lost to do much else. Iruka had his no-nonsense voice and Naruto would be damned before he went against it. I'll distract him. Be quick. As if. Iruka pushed Naruto just in time to duck under a kunai strike. The teacher sneered. Mizuki, the white-haired Chunin, simply attempted to strike again, his kunai biting through the air toward Iruka's arm, his other hand releasing a brace of shuriken toward Naruto. The brown-haired man angled himself so that the strike caught him on his armor. Chunin flak jackets were actually more than enough to block a sword strike, given the steel was not augmented with some chakra-cutting ability. As it were, the kunai simply bounced off harmlessly and Iruka elbowed Mizuki in the face, breaking his nose. The white-haired ninja swore and jumped back. Naruto had jumped out of the way of his shuriken and had rolled the forbidden scroll shut, ready to spring off and away. Mizuki was loath to admit it, but if the blonde demon started running, he would not catch up. In a split second, the traitorous Chunin darted toward the boy, kunai ready to pierce his neck. Naruto. The blade cut through the blonde's raised forearm and a kick just under the sternum sent him tumbling away, breath ragged. Before Mizuki could follow up, Iruka nearly stabbed him through the calf. Run, Naruto. Why are you defending him? Mizuki growled, in between strikes, one ringing true against the brown-haired man's jaw yet not phasing him, another one landing a knife through his opponent's left shoulder but leaving him overextended. He stole the scroll. You set him up. Iruka punctuated his answer with a grappling move that ended with Mizuki's right elbow joint dislocated. The white-haired Chunin howled in pain and Iruka elbowed him again, under the chin this time. The traitor stumbled back and both Chunin broke the fight, panting. The exchange had lasted 30 seconds, at most, but the two men were breathing as if they had just run a marathon. He killed your parents. Mizuki's sudden scream froze Naruto in place. The blonde was ready to bolt, his breath steadier and his arms hugging the scroll like a lifeline, but the traitor's claim had him rooted to the ground. What? Don't listen, Naruto. Run. Do you know why you're treated like you are, demon? Mizuki spat, intent on buying some time. He had not counted on Iruka being here and he had certainly not expected the brown-haired Chunin to be in such good form. Mizuki, shoo. You're the Kiwabi, Naruto. The white-haired man hollered madly. You are a demon. Iruka shot like a bolt out of a crossbow, taking the traitor by surprise and landing a solid hit on his head before Mizuki retaliated with a kunai cutting Iruka's leg. I'm what? Whispered the blonde boy, still frozen and incapable of processing what had just been said. Yet it made a twisted sense. How the people in Konoha were afraid of him, angry at him, ignored him. But the demon had been killed by the fourth Hokage. He had learned it in history class. He had killed the demon on the day of Naruto's birth. Mizuki smirked through the haze Iruka had put him in. The bastard had hit him hard but he had won the exchange. The cut on the brown-haired man's leg would slow him too much to save the demon. The traitor took another brace of shuriken and hurled the whirling stars of steel toward the blonde abomination. Naruto. The world slowed as Iruka saw the shuriken cut through the air toward Naruto. The steel stars were absolutely harmless against an armor-wearing opponent, not much more than a distraction against the frozen boy. The would possibly cut an artery and he would bleed out. Iruka melded chakra in the heartbeat and flooded his leg muscles with raw life energy before jumping. Naruto watched as the deadly star sped toward him. He wanted to move, desperately so, but he could not. His body refused to obey him and his mind was too preoccupied with puzzling the impossible revelation Mizuki had imparted unto him. For a second, he wondered how the situation had degenerated so before closing his eyes. The shuriken gave a muffled sound when they embedded themselves in Iruka's flak jacket. But the pain scream that escaped the teacher's throat when his leg muscles either cramped on him or tore covered everything. Iruka. Sensei. Run, Naruto. The Chunin bit through the pain. For a second, the blonde contemplated the idea before the consequences of such an act hit him. If he left right here and right now, Mizuki would kill Iruka. The thought of such a thing happening filled Naruto with white-hot anger, magmatic fury, earth-shattering scorn. The blonde melded chakra, every last bit, and to hell with it if some of it felt terribly raw. His fingers crossed in front of him to mold the raging maelstrom of life energy flooding his pathway. The blonde roared. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A wave of powerful, Scathing chakra expanded outward and smoke filled the clearing. Before Iruka's gobsmacked eyes and Mizuki's terrified ones stood 100 or so blonde boys, their face distorted by righteous fury and their knuckles cracking in anticipation. "I'll beat you to a pulp," Tebeo cursed the blonde army. And Naruto made good on that promise, overwhelming the already shaken traitor in a sea of blonde and blue, leaving a twitching, bloody, unconscious mess sprawled on the ground. Not 20 seconds later, their office done, the army of clones dispelled, leaving a wobbling Naruto behind, the blonde momentarily suffering from a splitting headache. Naruto, the original blonde, whirled toward his teacher, who was eyeing him with a mix of awe, relief, and worry. The boy rubbed his head, the strange pain already forgotten. "I went too hard, did I?" Iruka chuckled weakly. "No, not really." The teacher suddenly scowled, the pain of his wrecked legs catching up thought his astonishment. "Iruka-sensei, are you okay?" asked Naruto worriedly, trying his best to help the Chunin stand. The man grimaced and the blonde simply propped him up against a tree. "I shot my legs," answered the man. A shift in his position made him growl. "Oh, I'm definitely upping my training," joked Iruka with a weak smile. Naruto looked down, biting his lower lips. "Sensei, what happened?" "What Mizuki said." Iruka ruffled the blonde hair. "First thing first, Naruto, I think I have the gist of it, but tell me why you stole the scroll," he ordered in a pained voice. The blonde's eyes watered. I didn't want." And Naruto explained to Iruka how Mizuki had offered him a shot at a makeup test. "I'm never gonna be a ninja, am I?" Naruto concluded, voice strained by held-up tears. Having the entire story, Iruka sighed twice. The man then offered a smile to his student. "Come here, Naruto, and close your eyes." The blonde obeyed hesitantly. He heard some shuffling sound and felt something be fastened around his forehead. "Open your eyes now." Iruka, without his headband, was smiling at him warmly. With hesitant hands, Naruto touched the rectangle of steel bearing the leaf insignia. Warm tears fell and rolled down his cheeks. The blonde jumped at his sensei and squeezed the man in a hug, sobbing his thanks. It was that scene a team of Anbu discovered a minute later. So, to summarize, seated in the Hokage office, Naruto told the old man how his night had gone. Iruka had been carried to the hospital and it was the blonde's responsibility to explain himself. It took 20 minutes but Naruto explained the best he could, trying his best to not forget any details. Hiruzen Sarutobi was tired, so very tired. He had but one wish right now, and it was to go to bed. The night had been nightmarish. Someone had infiltrated the tower right under the nose of the guards, picked the lock of the vault, and made off with the forbidden scroll, all without the use of chakra. Then Mizuki Hashiro, a Chunin, had pretended to see Naruto, of all people, with the scroll. And Mizuki had revealed to be a traitor, having conned Naruto into believing there was a makeup exam for the one the boy had just failed, and planning to kill the Jinchuriki and disappearing with the scroll. And the situation had miraculously resolved itself thanks to Iruka Umino discovering Naruto, fighting Mizuki to a standstill, and Naruto beating the traitorous Chunin to a pulp thanks to the Shadow Clone Jutsu. The Hokage groaned, half in frustration, half in weariness, entirely in relief. It was a fucking miracle, no less. The old man eyed the blonde boy sitting before him. Naruto had the decency to have his blue eyes lowered in shame. Hiruzen sighed. "I, Hiruzen Sarutobi, Hokage of Konohagakure, have taken into consideration the recommendation of Chunin Iruka Umino to grant Naruto Uzumaki a field promotion to Genin. By my authority, I confirm the recommendation. Do you accept it, Naruto Uzumaki?" Naruto immediately stood at attention like he had been taught in the academy, feet joined, left hand above the heart, right head on flat on his right calf, and furiously nodded. "Yes, Hokage-sama." The old man smiled. "Then welcome to the Kogen, Genin Uzumaki." Naruto bowed, doing his best to contain the smile that wanted to blossom on his lips. "Now I think we have another matter to discuss." The Hokage's grave tone immediately brought the blonde back on earth. "Yes, Hokage-sama?" asked the boy hesitantly. "Now that you have been exposed to lies, we believe it would be unwise to not address the question properly." Another voice, gruff and distorted, rang out. Naruto did it best not to jump and turned. Behind him was an Anbu with a dragon mask. "Naruto, meet Dragon, Anbu's general." "Dragon, Naruto," the Hokage said in a tired voice. Is it about what Mizuki said?" The masked Anbu nodded. "Yes. You have to know the truth about your status." "My status?" The Anbu Supreme Commander nodded again. "Mizuki told you were the Kiwabi." "It is not true." "You are the Kiwabi's Jinchuriki." "Dragon," the old Kage exclaimed, apparently wishing the cloaked individual had been less blunt. Jin shrieky. Naruto tried the word. It was unknown to him. The Anbu ignored the Hokage's outburst. We told the population the Kyuubi was killed by the Yondaime. It wasn't, for the simple reason no man found a way to kill Abiyu yet. The Yondaime trapped the beast inside an infant. There was a pregnant silence for a few seconds before the boy broke it. Me. It was not a question. Naruto wasn't stupid and could put 2 and 2 together to obtain 4. Most of the time at least. You, confirmed the Anbu. But I. Then Naruto frowned, too confused to feel much else. You are the Kyuubi's warden. It's prison, if you will. The boy gulped. So, I'm not a demon? Of course not, my boy, the Hokage exclaimed heatedly. And allow no one to call you that. Naruto felt his eyes prickle and water despite him. But then, why do they treat me like that? The boy asked with a shaky voice. Both the Hokage and the Anbu sighed. The cloaked figure threw a glance at Hiruzen, who nodded. They fear you, Naruto. The Kyuubi caused a lot of pain, which you are a constant reminder of. But I did not ask for it, the blonde exclaimed, terror streaking down his whiskered face. It's not my fault, he protested again, voice racked with sobs. The Hokage rose from his seat and hurriedly engulfed the boy in a hug. Hiruzen sighed. Naruto was so very young still. Of course not, Naruto. Of course not. But the pain the Kyuubi caused turned to fear, and fear to hate, and rather than see you as the hero you are, they blame their sorrow on you. Hiruzen explained. They decided to cling to their hate and blame you, rather than honor the sacrifice of the one they claim they love. The Anbu interjected. Truly, they understand nothing. Naruto broke the hug suddenly and took a step back. His teary face was set in a scowl, one Hiruzen had never seen on the blonde's face. They are such ingrates. The boy hurled in anger. All this time they hated me for something I didn't do? Naruto's tone was heated but mainly held disbelief. And frankly, all assembled in the room could understand why. Then, something struck him. How do they even know? Why do they know what I am? Demanded the blonde with steel in his voice. It made no sense. Konoha after the Kyuubi's attack had been a field of smoking ruins. Naruto had seen the photos. How come the entire population of Konoha, which certainly had better things to do at the time, knew of him? The Yondaime wished for you to be seen as a hero and I foolishly granted him his last wish, Hiruzen explained quietly, voice strained by anguish. But the people I so trusted betrayed me. They betrayed us, their leaders. They betrayed the will of fire and I couldn't convince them of their folly. So I made a law when I saw that the survivors would hate you. They were not to speak to anyone to your condition. The voice of the old man wavered and broke for a second. I hoped that it'd allow you to live normally, to make friends. Naruto winced and his scowl came back with a vengeance. Well, that worked well, sneered the blonde, anger thick in his voice. It worked so very well, he muttered again bitterly, before deflating. Why me, though? Why him? The bad luck of the draw? The only baby available? No, that could not be right. Nearly all his classmates were older than him. His brain made and discarded scenarios one after the other. The Kyuubi had not been near the hospital. Yet, according to the old man, Naruto's parents had died in the attack. Were they ninja then? No, otherwise, the records would have DNA information and he would not bear the Uzumaki namesake. His parents were civilians. Logically, maybe he was born at home. Had his parents died in the first sweep of the tails? But then he should have died too. Why did the fourth choose him, an orphan, to hold the beast? Had his parents offered him? Was he an orphan before the fourth chose him, or after? The thought froze Naruto. The fourth killed my real parents, Naruto declared, his voice a monotone. What? The Hokage sputtered in abject horror. What gave you this idea? Why me? Why not one of the clan kids? The fourth had an entire generation of clan heir to choose from, but no, he picked a nameless orphan. That raises questions, doesn't it? The blonde spoke quickly but his voice was still just as emotionless. The reasoning made the Kage's eyes widen. And no, Naruto, of course the fourth. Then they abandoned me. They were disgusted by me. Of course not. Then why me? Naruto screamed in rage, anger tainting his chakra and leaking like poison, the floor creaking under the pressure. Who are my parents? Where are they now? Why did they allow the damned Yondaime to use me? I cannot. Kushina Uzumaki. The calm, distorted voice rang through the office, assuaging Naruto's mounting fury and silencing the Kage. The blonde turned to the Anbu. What? Dragon, I order you. Your mother's now. Killing intent erupted and faster than one could blink. The Hokage was holding the Anbu by its throat, lifting the individual above ground, effectively strangling them. "One more word and I'll have you executed," the Sarutobi threatened Kushina Uzumaki. Hiruzen shuddered when he felt a glare being levied on him by the one person he had hoped would never glare at him. "You knew," whispered Naruto. "All this time you knew. And you told me nothing," the blonde continued in a hushed murmur. Hiruzen's dark eyes met Naruto's azure orbs and the old cage's heart broke when all he could see was betrayal and disappointment. "Hokage-sama, may I be excused?" the blonde asked, his voice absolutely blank. But Hiruzen balked. "Naruto, by your leave, Hokage-sama." The old man sighed. "Dismissed, Genin Uzumaki." Naruto lost no time and bolted out of the office. Hiruzen glared harshly at the Anbu he was still strangling. "I should execute you." "You are a coward," spat the masked man, his throat held shut by the vice-like grip of the old cage. Hiruzen opened his hand and the commander fell in a heap on the ground, wheezing and massaging their throat. "You are dismissed, Dragon." The ANB rose to its feet and nodded stiffly. "To solve a problem, one needs to face it out," the old Hokage roared. Naruto dragged himself through the streets of Konoha, dawn illuminating the village with its first lights. His thoughts was whirling around chaotically in his head. The Hokage had repeatedly told him he did not know who his parents were and Naruto had come to accept it. Now the blonde discovered the old man he trusted had lied to him. What other truths had his grandfather figure withheld from him? The Kiwabi, his parents. What was next? A hidden family member. And the village hated him for something he had no control over. Since little, he had dreamed to gain their acknowledgement and the Hokage had assured him that if he tried, he would. But now, Naruto was second-guessing himself. He was not giving up, absolutely not, for giving up was not the Naruto Uzumaki way, but was gaining the acknowledgement of a group of ungrateful bigots. Even worth it? Was it even possible? If all they could see in him was the fox, then being Hokage would change nothing. The blonde climbed the stairs to his tiny flat and entered his 2-rooms apartment. The place was in tatter and it wasn't even his fault mostly, but the sorry state of his place was of no concern to the boy right now. Naruto plopped down his rundown sofa and kept on thinking. He did not hate the villagers, he decided. They were hateful ignorants who had made their choice and they had made Naruto's life difficult, quite difficult actually. But the boy refused to hate them. He would not become a hateful ignorant himself, Naruto decided firmly. He would be better than them, which did not mean he could not hold them in contempt. He could be beyond reproach, the best of all, the Hokage. He could not tell Konoha what to feel and think about him. Certainly, his pranks had not helped but it mattered little ultimately. He could not change people. Only people could change themselves. Naruto sighed and looked at his hands. Sometime during his musings, he had loosened his headband. The piece of engraved steel reflected his face. The metal was muted, the very small scratch dulling its sheeniness. There was even a small brown spot. Blood recently dried up. Iruka's or Mizuki's. What did he truly want? Did he even have the choice? With the beast trapped within him, Naruto reckoned the answer to that was probably not. So if he did not have the choice, he had to make the best of it. If being a ninja was his path, he'd be the damn best ninja possible. Tebeo. He'd never be helpless again like tonight. He'd never have someone fight for him like tonight. He'd never be found wanting. Naruto's grip tightened around the headband and his face hardened in resolution. He fastened the insignia around his head again. "I'm a ninja now, Tebeo," whispered the boy in a low but confident voice. Naruto woke up, eyes bleary from lack of sleep and stomach protesting in hunger, to the sound of someone insistently knocking on his door. It took a minute for the boy to collect himself and realized he was on his couch. Racking his brain to understand why he was on his living room rather than in his bed, Naruto yawned. A yawn wide enough to unhinge his jaw. It was at this moment he remembered the strange, heavy, never felt before wave of exhaustion falling on him like a cloak of lead earlier in the morning. Before he could think about it in more detail, the knocks on his door doubled and the blonde hopped off of his small sofa and stumbled through his flat, his gait shaky, towards his door. Yes, yes, groaned the blonde while opening the wooden panel. Standing in his doorway was a masked Anbu. Naruto started slightly, stifled another yawn, and shook his head left and right to dissipate the last remnant of sleep. "What can I do for you, Anbu-san?" "You have been summoned by the Hokage, Uzumaki-san. Be at the tower at noon. It is currently 11. For your information." "Hi, Anbu-san," answered Naruto with a bow. The masked individual simply disappeared in a swirl of leaves, his mission accomplished. The blonde yawned again. It was unusual for him to feel this tired, as normally, A few hours of sleep had him energized for a day. Naruto chalked it up to the events of the night and closed his door when what the Anbu had just told him hit him truly. He was summoned by the Hokage. The event of the night flooded his mind. He was a genin now. What did the Hokage want with him? Would Naruto be placed on a team? He had no idea when team placement would happen. Did he actually need to fill paperwork and sign waivers? The blonde frowned. How did he feel about the man he called grandpa anyway? Where were they standing now? Naruto was angry at this surrogate grandfather for hiding the truth for so long. He was a real Uzumaki, whatever it meant, and his mother's name was Kushina. He could only wonder why the old man had hidden the identity of his mother. It wasn't the surname. Logically, if Uzumaki had been dangerous in some way, then he would not carry the name. That was assuming the old man actually cared about him. Naruto felt his innards sink at the thought. Had the Hokage's apparent affection been faked? Was the old man like everyone else, wishing for the blonde to disappear, but better at hiding it? Had the elder ninja been callous behind a facade of gentleness? Naruto's frown deepened before he shook his head and shuddered. No. He could not think like that. He was angry at his grandfather for lying, but one lie did not mean everything was veiled in deceit. What did several lies for 12 years mean, though? The Kiwabi, his parents, then what else? It certainly meant the Hokage did not trust him, not even with the name of Naruto's very own mother. And if the Hokage knew his mother, he had to have a reasonable clue as to the identity of his father. The blonde was shaking, a weird mix of emotion he could not identify twisting his guts. There was anger, disappointment, betrayal, and loss. Naruto did not know where he himself stood right now. He knew the world of ninja was lying and killing, in theory at least. It was Konoha's bread and butter after all. Discovering your entire life was shrouded in a layer of lies was not agreeable at all. The question was, how many layers and how many lies in all? Yes, Naruto was angry with his grandfather. Could he be angry with the Hokage though? Not really. Now that he was a genin, he would not get away with his usual attitude, and the Hokage was his commanding officer. Their relationship had to be at the very least cordial. The blonde sighed loudly. Yesterday, his life was simple. He was a nobody. The villagers hated him for no reason, and the Hokage was a kind grandpa who Naruto trusted absolutely. Today, his life was more complicated than ever. He was the Jinchuriki of the Kiwabi no Kitsune. The villagers were dickish idiots, and the Hokage had lied to him about not knowing who his parents were. The blonde clasped his hands around his temples and groaned as he shook his head left and right. Why me? After a minute of careful consideration and waiting, Naruto had to accept the answer would probably not fall from above and directed his steps toward the shower. Whether he liked the old man or not, he could not say no to a meeting requested by the Hokage. Under the hot running water and now in front of a cup of steaming instant ramen, Naruto had been and was thinking still about this mysterious mother of his. Inhaling some noodle with a noisy slurping sound, the blonde thought hard about the secrecy. Was his mother a criminal, and was it the reason he had been chosen to host the BU? But had it been the case, Naruto would probably not be named Uzumaki. His name was supposedly honored within Konoha. The flak jackets of Chu and Jonin bore the red spiral of the Uzumaki clan. Maybe his mother had been an orphan much like him and was simply bearing the namesake. Naruto had the name of his mother, half the answer to one of his lifelong questions, and yet it brought even more questions. The biggest being, why was it such a secret? The blonde slurped the last of his noodles when an idea hit him. He could send a shadow clone. They were intelligent, tangible clones after all. He could send one or two at the academy library and they could look up the Uzumaki name. And he could send one to the archives. He had a headband now. He could not be denied access. The boy nodded, satisfied with his plan, and crossed his fingers to mold the necessary chakra. Shadow clone jutsu. In a triple puff of smoke, 3 replicas appeared. Naruto smiled and designed 2 of them. You too. Library. Got it, said one before the 2 darted out toward his room to exit a second later with some blank scrolls to take note on. And I'll go to the archives, boss, exclaimed the 3rd clone before doing the same circuit as the 2 other, exiting the flat with what was necessary for his mission. Naruto held a puzzled expression for a second before he realized what the actions of his clones meant. If he created shadow clones with one or several purposes in mind, they knew what to do already. This jutsu was beyond awesome. A wide smile blossomed on Naruto's face. Learning the shadow clone was worth the trouble of the night. Maybe. Almost. Considering Iruka's injuries, probably not. As a second thought, Naruto realized he had no idea how much time a shadow clone actually lasted. His smile faltered, but the boy decided it was of little importance. Ultimately, with or without shadow clones, he would do his research. The wide smile returning to his face, the blonde exited his flat. He had 10 minutes to reach the Huckage Tower. He was on time. Hiruzen Sarutobi was tired, weary, done with it, but above all he was anxious because of his stupid Anbu commander. There was no telling how Naruto would be with him. The Huckage side. He had lied, for so long, justifying the secret with increasingly flimsy reasons. He knew the truth would one day be revealed to the boy, but Hiruzen had hoped something. Maybe his old masked friend was right. Maybe age had made him cowardly. Hiruzen sighed again. No, not age. Age was an excuse. A part of him had always been like this. He could lead and fight a war, slaughter countless souls, but when it came to people he was attached to, he could not face his mistakes. Tsunade, Orochimaru, his sons, and now Naruto. A growing list of people he had been too afraid to face, for various reasons. He just hoped Naruto was only angry with him. He could not take it if the boy decided to hate him. Hiruzen leveled a glare at the dragon-masked shadow standing in the corner of his office. All because some rowdy subordinate had seen fit to talk. Despite the mask, the Huckage could feel the commander was answering with a glare of his own. The two old men locked eyes for a minute in a staring contest, heavily in favor of the cloaked man, as glaring at a blank mask was incredibly jarring. The Huckage averted his gaze first and sighed. "I would like to apologize for earlier." The old man breathed out like someone had ripped a tooth out of his mouth. "I was tired, worried, and not thinking clearly," completed the masked commander. "There is not much to forgive. I will not retract my words, though. If that is what you are counting on, the boy will hate me now." Hiruzen almost whined. "If that is the extent of your trust in him, then he would be right to do so," Dragon answered in a scathing monotone. The Huckage winced and palmed his face. "You are right, of course." Silence fell on the two ninja. Dragon was perfectly still while the Huckage was fidgeting with increasing intensity. "What will you tell him?" the Anbu asked suddenly, stopping Hiruzen's flailing. "What?" "The boy will need answers, Hiruzen," chided the Anbu in a vaguely impatient tone. "The only questions are, what answers and who will give them? His father's name is a secret. That is non-negotiable. I know the logic behind that, and it is erroneous by now. It will do much more harm when the truth eventually comes out." "I said non-negotiable," the Huckage boomed, his fist impacting his desk, killing intent flaring. "Are your eyes still seeing straight, Hiruzen?" roared the Anbu in response, his own intent crashing against the Huckage's. "You're pushing the dirt under the carpet, hoping it won't explode in your face. In all of our face. He will hate me." "Do you think so little of him? And are you willing to risk his loyalty for personal feelings?" The Huckage deflated. "Did I not sacrifice enough?" he pleaded. "And maybe Naruto didn't. Maybe I didn't. If the hat hangs too heavy, you know what to do, Hiruzen. If you won't face the responsibilities of being Huckage, then stop." The Huckage chuckled humorlessly. "And who will replace me? Tsunade, the wrecked drunk Jiraiya, the man-child Kakashi, lost in his grief? Tell me, Dragon, who is strong enough to wear this hat?" Hiruzen spat. The Anbu sighed. He refrained himself from telling the Huckage how two of the three problems were products of his continued refusal to face them and straighten them, and sighed again. If the mask wasn't in the way, the shadow would have rubbed their eyelids. The figure closed their eyes and blinked when an idea hit. "Groom him," said the Anbu slowly. Hiruzen focused his eyes on the mask. "I'm sorry, groom Naruto." The Huckage's left eyebrow rose-budded was the extent of his surprise. "I thought you wanted him." "Shadow clones," answered the commander, as if it was the answer for everything. Silence fell on the office again as Hiruzen contemplated the idea. Shadow clones did seem like they were the answer. Maybe not to everything, but certainly to this. The old Cage sighed and slumped. It did not solve his more immediate problem. I can tell him. If he comes to hate me, fire. I couldn't take it," the Huckage whispered. "Miserable." The Anbu stood silent for a minute. "Have you forgotten Tobirama-sensei lessons, Hiruzen?" the operator asked gently. "Is your flame of your will extinguished? Lost? We are shinobi, Hiruzen. We endure. But Naruto is a shinobi too. Now who are you to say he cannot endure with you?" The Anbu interrupted. "Tobirama-sensei trusted us with the future, Hiruzen. It's time we do the same with the young generation." The old Cage's shoulder sagged and a long sigh escaped him just as a weight seemed to be lifted from him. "Are you sure you do not want the hat?" the Huckage asked, half-jokingly. "We both know why it is impossible, old friend." The Huckage nodded. "Indeed we do." Silence fell again, comfortable this time. "So, what will you tell him?" the Anbu asked, his monotone back. The Huckage rubbed his eyes. "About his mother, everything I can. I do not know how he will take to the news of his father as well as we could reasonably hope he does. Meaning mad. Yes, probably. But it's only fair. A knock on the door interrupted the two. Hiruzen sighed but nodded minutely, and another Anbu appeared from the shadow to open the armored panel of fake wood. The Hokage's secretary, a petite brunette woman, was standing in the frame. You summoned Naruto Uzumaki, Hokage-sama? Indeed, Miki. Thank you. The woman nodded once and allowed a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, whiskered boy to enter the office. The armored door was closed immediately. You asked for me, Hokage-sama, Naruto said in his best monotone. Hiruzen felt his heart tighten at the address. Yesterday, the boy would have gone with a sonorous "What's up, Gigi?" and Hiruzen would have smiled at the blonde's brightness. Today, the usual sunny disposition of the boy was subdued, hidden by a veil of clouds, a veil of deceit. Much like I veiled the truths of his life, thought Hiruzen sadly. Yes, Naruto, I did, answered the Kage eventually. You are here to discuss your ninja career. Sit down please. Naruto nodded and took the offered seat and had to rein in a jump when an Anbu, the same dragon-masked one as yesterday, as far as he could tell, spoke. Hello, Uzumaki-san. The risk of cardiac arrest averted, and after some choice curse words about sneaky cloaked freaks muttered under his breath, Naruto chose to answer. Hello, Anbu-sama. Dragon, Uzumaki-san. Naruto nodded. Hi, Dragon-sama. Dragon here is a proposal for you, Naruto. I want to be clear that you are in no way forced to accept. Am I clear? Asked Hiruzen. It was the deal the Hokage and Dragon had agreed on, which pretty much amounted to following the normal rule of Anbu. Potential recruits were scouted by the Corps, but only those who volunteered could be considered for enrollment. Naruto nodded. Clear, Hokage-sama. The boy eyed the Anbu with undisguised curiosity. He had no idea why he was here, but if the Anbu commander themselves was here, it promised to be interesting. Naruto Uzumaki, born October 10th. Year 1253 of Fire Country Calendar. Made Genin yesterday by field promotion. Failed the classic graduation process 3 times. The masked shadow enumerated. Naruto felt his hopes take a dive at the last part and lowered his head in shame. It wasn't his fault the damned clone jutsu was impossible for him. Frequently pranked the villagers with harmless stunts and outrun the ensuing chase party of Chunin easily, often leading them into traps of his own making. The boy had honestly no idea if he was supposed to be proud or ashamed, so settled for rubbing the back of his head. Jinchuriki of the Kiwabi. Investigations revealed that despite the situation being known by most of the teaching body, it was not properly addressed. The massive chakra reserves and abysmal control resulting from being a Jinchuriki were never worked on by any teachers. As such, and very obviously, the ninjutsu part of Uzumaki's exam was failed. Naruto perked up at that. So being a Jinchuriki gave him big chakra reserve and shot his control. And the teachers knew and did nothing. Did Iruka also know? The boy felt indignant but decided to listen further. Individual is brash and lacks discipline. He also displays a lack of focus during certain activities, frequently acts up during his classes and dress in orange, which, for a ninja in training, is beyond weird. The last two behavior can be attributed to Uzumaki's craving for attention. Naruto felt heat coloring his cheeks. His hand fell lamely on his thigh and the boy looked down. The assessment was truthful, but it was not agreeable to hear. Yeah, all subjects did not hold his attention equally. It was so for everyone. Yes, he knew he was supposed to have the attention span of a toddler. Mean teachers had repeated that to him numerous times. Yes, being a clown was not glorious, but at least his classmates laughed, even if it was at him. Yes, it was tiring to be ignored and disregarded, and orange was a color no one could unsee. Naruto scowled to avoid crying. These are the general observations of one of my agent, who was tasked with observing you, for 2 years. How do you feel about this report? Uzumaki-san, Dragon asked, surprisingly gentle. Naruto looked up at the mask and gulped, averting his eyes from the blank armor of porcelain. The boy bit through his own constricted throat. It's true, Naruto said feebly. If I told you, you could benefit from the attention of several unbiased instructors, ready to help you learn and punch discipline into you, would you be interested? The blonde's eyes shot up and anchored themselves on the blank mask, trying intently to see through the porcelain. If I told you I could find you a team who would trust you with their life, would you be interested? Naruto's jaw went slack and hope shone in his blue eyes. If I told you, you could be away from the villagers, hidden from their view, would you be interested? The boy started to nod enthusiastically before disbelief slowly etched its way in his blue orbs. After a second, they went down. Yeah, but I doubt any of that is possible. A fair sentiment. That is why I would like to offer you a trial run. A trial run? A trial run in Anbu. Naruto's brain had to restart after a total freeze. A trial run in Anbu. The man had just offered Naruto to join Anbu, the best of the best, the elite among the elite, those tasked with missions no one knew about. The Leaf's shadows, the silent kunai, the answer to Konoha's enemies. The men and women with cool masks and the shadowy cloak. The blonde boy had to rein in the urge to bounce around the office. Dragon had just told him he lacked discipline and Naruto had a hunch his exuberance would be seen as such. The boy breathed deeply to calm himself and directed his haywire thoughts at the offer. Dedicated teachers, a group to belong to, and hidden from the village. The boy realized it was pretty much what he dreamed of. It was too good to be true, actually. And his enthusiasm nosedived. It was so good it couldn't possibly be true. Something would not work out. Something was lying in wait to screw him. Why? Naruto eventually asked, at a loss of what to think. The ANBU shifted just yesterday, began the operator in a neutral voice. You infiltrated the Hokage Tower without choosing chakra, in a way no one even thought about, demonstrated creative abilities in Finjutsu, stole the forbidden scroll from the vault by picking one of the most secure lock in Konoha, escaped pursuit by remotely detonating firework to throw off your pursuers, learned a high-level jutsu in an hour or so, and it is only thanks to the traitor we knew of your identity. The ANBU took a deep gulp of air, his breathing short from the enumeration. And you ask why? Uzumaki-san, despite what some might say, that's what I call talent, and it has the excellent taste to be backed up by hard work. Naruto blushed at what he was quite certain was praise. Presented like that, his little escapade last night did sound pretty awesome. The blonde scratched the back of his scalp. You mean it? The blonde smiled, illuminating the room. Hee, I knew I was awesome. Yes, you are so awesome you were manipulated by a traitor to steal one of Konoha's most dangerous asset and you did not even stop to think about it. The commander deadpanned. Naruto deflated. Presented like that, his little escapade last night did sound pretty stupid and terrible. The boy fidgeted awkwardly. First lesson, Uzumaki-san, whether you accept or not, a ninja must be humble. The blonde nodded. Hi, Dragon-sama, he answered in a subdued voice. Good. Now, Uzumaki-san, what will you decide? Naruto looked down at his feet, his hands resting on his lap. He wasn't sure. Confusing and contradictory trains of thoughts was whirling around in his mind. What about being Hokage? Could Anbu don the hat? And if he went into the shadows, how would the villagers ever come to see him? The blonde shook his head and hardened his features. No, he had already decided the reasons for his dream were meaningless. And behind a mask and a cloak, he would get the respect he wanted. It would not be for him per se but for the function he would represent. He knew that. But maybe that was the lot of all ninja. Celebrity, of any kind, was not shinobi business after all. And it was incidental if it happened. And he was a ninja now. He had also decided to become a fine one, the finest shinobi he possibly could be. If celebrity and fame ever found him, then perfect, and maybe then the villagers would change, but chasing after it made little sense. Anbu seemed like a good place. Invested instructors rather than neglectful teachers, comrades rather than strangers, acceptance rather than scorn. But what about Sakura-chan? One insidious, traitorous part of his brain whispered. What about showing up to the tem? It continued. What about showing them all how awesome you truly are? Anbu are the shadows and you won't get to do that if you join. Naruto, who had been frozen silent for 2 minutes now flailed suddenly, startling the two older ninjas slightly, and palmed his face with both his hands before dragging them down. Cheeks and lower eyelids stretched downward. Naruto sighed. Why was it so complicated to make such a simple decision? The question was simple. Yes or no? At a loss, the blonde decided to use an old trick of his he used for complex Finjutsu problems, reformulate the question to baser, simpler elements. Did he want to have a mask, wear a coat, and be an all-around awesome ninja? Hell yes. Naruto nodded. Good. Was anything else of consequence? Absolutely not. The blonde smiled. His resolve finally made, Naruto looked back up at the Hokage first, then at Dragon second. I accept, said the boy, his voice firm and his gaze set. Hiruzen sighed imperceptibly at his surrogate grandson's decision. Whatever happened next was outside of his control. Naruto would either make the cut or break. The Hokage had nary doubt the blonde would make it, but worrying about the younglings is the prerogative of the elders. Dragon was content to simply nod once to signify he had heard the boy and cleared his voice. Remove your headband, Uzumaki-san. Blue eyes wavered with confusion. What? Simply remove your headband, Naruto. The old cage said. Naruto mutely obeyed. Good. Naruto Uzumaki, began Dragon solemnly. This is your very last opportunity to refuse this headband and the service as a shinobi of the leaf and walk away. Do you wish to do so? That was an easy answer to give. No, Dragon-sama. Naruto Uzumaki, do you swear to give your sweat, your blood, and your life if necessary to defend Konoha and its interests? Dragon began, his distorted baritone suddenly rolling in thunderous, powerful waves, rooting the boy in his chair. Do you swear to honor the will of fire, live by its precepts, and die in its defense? Do you swear to show bravery in adversity, resolve in duty, steadfastness in death? The Hokage continued. His voice was calmer but distinctly clear for Naruto to hear, and just as powerful. Do you swear allegiance to the Hokage, obedience to your officer, but above all, do you swear loyalty towards your comrades? Dragon thundered behind his mask, staring the blonde boy down. Naruto hesitated the fraction of a second before he jumped out of his chair, his blood boiling. I swear it, Tebeo. A second later, the blonde sputtered, his face donning a crimson shade, as he realized his verbal tic had kicked in with a vengeance. The Hokage chuckled and even Dragon snorted. Maybe with mirth in his voice, the Anbu commander spoke again. Then fasten your hatayite, Naruto Uzumaki, and may it be a reminder of your oath to Konoha. Naruto nodded furiously before he donned the headband, his hands fumbling a bit from the adrenaline. Once it was secure around his forehead, the blonde looked up. I'm a ninja now, Naruto said with a smile, his voice filled with peaceful, assured confidence. It was not boastful promise, nor was it a questioning statement. After the oath he had just taken, there was no doubt Naruto was a shinobi. Indeed, confirmed Dragon. Silence fell for a few seconds in the office before the man fished a piece of paper from the depth of his cloak. Now, if you're still interested about Anbu, sign that please. The commander deadpanned. A shock drop formed on Naruto's brow. Paperwork and waivers, he had called it. The waiver had promptly disappeared after Naruto had signed it. It was basically a contract stipulating that for the next 7 years, the blonde was to serve and only death or crippling injury would free him. Renewable. It also classified his enrollment as an A-rank secret, one even Naruto himself could not divulge without his officer's authorization. Dragon had informed him they would masquerade his absence from the regular rooster by assigning him a fake desk job. More importantly, being an Anbu meant two things. First, his salary was more money in a month than he had ever received. Second, he had official authority over any genin. Dragon was quick to kill his joy with a threat of very severe punishment were he to abuse his rank. Suddenly, the Hokage waved and Naruto saw 4 shadows materialize in a queue, the first opening the door, the 4 Anbu spilling outside the office and the door closing. The blonde turned toward the Hokage as the old man coughed in his hand. Yesterday, Dragon revealed a piece of sensitive information. Naruto stiffened and nodded. The boy knew the old man was talking about his mother. Choosing to stay silent, Naruto simply waited. He was tired of asking only to receive no answer. If the Hokage had to tell him something, he would tell him. The boy leveled a stare at the old man he called Grandpa and frowned. Hiruzen fidgeted. He had hoped to never see this gaze again, as horrible as it sounded. But of course, Naruto had inherited from his father much more than his look. The Hokage internally shuddered as 2 piercing, all-seeing blue eyes looked at his soul, ready to spot the lies and the deceit. It was the same look Hiruzen's successor, and unfortunately, predecessor, had when he was ready to call pretty much anyone on their bullshit. Taking a deep breath, the cage steeled himself. Your mother, Hiruzen began, failing to find the words. Your mother was an amazing woman. The Hokage exhaled his relief when a small smile blossomed on Naruto's tightly locked lips. She was a surviving member of the Uzumaki clan, now extinct. She came here to be the second Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Second? I'm the third? Naruto interrupted in surprise. Hiruzen nodded. Yes. It's quite a long story. I personally have the time, Hokage-sama, answered Naruto dryly. No way the old man was going to weasel his way out of this. The Hokage sighed. Very well. When Madara Uchiha turned against the leaf, he found a way to control the Kyuubi. Shodame faced the traitor and his beast and contained both thanks to his Mokuton. But the Buu was unstoppable ultimately and Mito Uzumaki sealed the rampaging fox inside her. Hiruzen stopped as he saw Naruto silently mouth Mito Uzumaki as if tasting the flavor of the name of a member of his clan, a long-deceased member of his ruined clan. When Mito-sama's old age caught up to her, She requested a girl be sent to her to host the beast that her death would free. It was your mother, Kushina Uzumaki. The smile on Naruto's face disappeared and was replaced by a worried scowl. Her status of Jinchuriki was a secret and she had a perfectly normal life if not for a few bullies who quickly learned their place. Continued the Cage, a faraway look in his eyes and a small smile tugging at his lips. Your mother was quite a hot-blooded girl. You have her temper and her wits, Naruto. The smile returned to the power of 10, lightening the office like a 1000-watt light bulb. Yes, she was quite spirited. What did she look like, Gigi? Naruto asked excitedly, his mind too absorbed by the fact he had a mother to fuel the anger and the possible distrust he was supposed to feel at the Hokage. Hiruzen allowed himself a relieved smile. Maybe Dragon was right. After all, he needed to trust Naruto. She had red hair, a sign of the Uzumaki clan, and her eyes were a very peculiar mix of blue and purple. She really was a beautiful woman and a deadly kunoichi. She gained a fearsome reputation by fighting against Kumo, who named her Habanero. Somehow, the smile Naruto sported grew larger and wider, splitting his face in half and shutting his eyes. The boy basked in the knowledge had not only a mother but an awesome mother. A thought erased the smile and the light it brought dimmed. Did she love me? The boy asked shyly, his conclusion from the previous discussion still at the forefront of his mind. And when the Hokage spoke, Naruto knew, at this instant, that his grandfather wasn't lying. Oh Naruto, she adored you. You weren't even there and you were already her world, whispered Hiruzen. Tears purled at the edge of Naruto's eyes and the boy blinked to chase them but they kept coming. The blonde cared mildly. His mind was too preoccupied with the feeling that was tearing and rending his heart in two. It hurt as nothing had ever hurt him and yet there was a pleasant warmth to it. His breath turned ragged and his throat refused to allow air to pass. His mother loved him. Cries of anguish, fear, but above all relief, escaped the blonde like water a broken dam. He had so feared she hated him. His mother loved him. Sobs racked his body, as he relived the nightmares of a faceless woman leaving him to the wolves. His mother. He had entertained the thought that he had been born from nothing, the spawn of a demon, the just victim of the village's hate. He had not noticed when but when his last tears were spilled, Naruto found himself in the arms of the Hokage. The old man had engulfed him in a hug like he had done so many times so long ago when Naruto had been smaller and younger and crying for the exact same reasons. Why didn't you tell me? Whispered the boy, too exhausted to muster any anger. The robes of his grandfather were warm and comfortable and Naruto decided he deserved the hug more than the Hokage deserved his anger. The boy felt the old man wince at his question. I never asked much, Gigi, so why didn't you tell me? Naruto insisted, disentangling himself from the long sleeves and wiping his nose and watery eyes on his own jumpsuit. Hiruzen sighed. He knew his excuse was flimsy at best but he had only that. Your mother made a lot of enemies. The Kiwabi rampage on the day of your birth was not an accident, Naruto, it was an attack. The Hokage rubbed his eyes before raising his hand, silencing Naruto's question. We don't know who or what but the reality is that Konoha was in shambles. Our forces had taken the biggest hit since the war, and I did not trust my own Anbu to keep anything secret. Naruto's eyes widened and the flames of his anger were rekindled. So outing me as the Jinchuriki was fine but telling me about my mother was not, exclaimed the blonde in disbelief and mounting fury. Someone had attacked his mother, rather obviously to free the beast, and they had done that despite her status being a secret but outing him was okay. Makes perfect sense, thought Naruto angrily. I had to be sure you'd keep it a secret. You were too young and then you became a blabbermouth, defended Hiruzen feebly. The blonde stared at the old man in mute anger. His mouth opened and closed, several times, as if words could not express what he truly wanted to say. Naruto's arms flailed randomly for a second. He was at a loss. Do I look that retarded to you? Naruto asked eventually, his head the picture perfect of incredulity. And no, of course. And then why didn't you tell me? Roared the blonde. Your mother had enemies. Keep it a secret cause it's dangerous. Got it? Naruto parodied in an admittedly good imitation of the Hokage, if it weren't for the barely contained anger in his tone. Was that too complicated, Tebeo? Hiruzen could only hang his head in shame. Naruto was definitely angry at him and he was rightfully so. The Hokage could order the blonde, now one of his ninja, to shut up. He could say he did not have to justify his decisions, he could throw a tantrum unbefitting of his age. But all that would finish to alienate the boy and for reasons both personal and political, he could absolutely not afford that. Dragon was right. Hiruzen had to face his mistakes and assume them, As disagreeable as it was, the Hokage looked up to see Naruto in a posture eerily reminiscent of his mother. His arms were crossed on his chest and his weight was on his left foot, while the right one was impatiently tapping the floor. But it was the piercing blue eyes that made Hiruzen felt like a child who was being scolded. So Hiruzen sagged in his chair. I have no excuse. Of course you don't, Tebeo, Naruto said, throwing his hands in the air and pacing around his chair, intent on digging a trench on the wooden floor. I am sorry, muttered the Kage. So very sorry. I don't know how to apologize, but if there is a way, I'd like to. Naruto stopped pacing, stared hard at the defeated old man sitting in a heap in his chair, threw his arms in the air again and exclaimed, of course you are. Before resuming his pacing, the blonde kept at it for 5 full minutes, arms flailing wildly and randomly and muttering what was probably curse words under his breath. Hiruzen could swear smoke was coming out of the boy's ears. 1 or 2 times, the boy allowed himself to furiously kick the bookshelf, hard enough to make it tremble. When angry, magmatic chakra started to roll off the boy in waves in a dark, stormy aura. Hiruzen started to sweat, wondering if was going to have to put the boy under. Abruptly, Naruto stopped and faced the older man. How do I even know what you said is the truth? The blonde asked with disdain in his voice. You lied to me for 12 years, what's stopping you now? Hiruzen thought his last hour had come when his heart stopped at the accusation. It was Dragon who came to his rescue. I can attest on my honor, Uzumaki-san, that Hiruzen told you the truth, offered the Anbu. Naruto whirled around. On your honor as a trained spy, thief, and assassin? The boy asked, one eyebrow raised. Fair point, but you're a shinobi now and I believe you've heard of honor among thieves? The boy glared at the impassive mask of the Anbu for a minute, doing his best to make the man sweat. I'm quite sure we'll find a picture, Dragon added eventually. Naruto thought lying now would be probably too much trouble for the 2 old men. And if they were lying, it was an incredibly complex lie that would soon crumble under its own weight. TCH. Fine, spat the whiskered blonde before he resumed his digging work. Again, the stormy aura spilled forth and for 5 more minutes, Naruto paced and paced, muttering under his breath. Suddenly, the boy stopped, whirled around and pointed an accusing finger at the Hokage, the maelstrom-like intent all but a fleeting memory. I'm angry, Gigi. You're the Hokage and I can't have a beef with the Hokage, but I want you to know I'm mad at my grandpa, the blonde exclaimed, waving his finger like he was conducting some invisible orchestra. Naruto then sighed and plopped back down on his chair and scowled at his commander-in-chief and surrogate grandfather. You owe me so much, Raymond. Hiruzen had to stifle a laugh and thank fire the boy took his ability to hold a grudge from his mother. Intense, scathing, damage-inducing, but short and always ready to forgive. Given enough time and Raymond, the world did not deserve the Uzumaki. Now all that was required of him was to find a small fortune paying for noodles. And a jutsu, added Naruto, tearing the Hokage from his thoughts. Lots and lots of Raymonds and a jutsu. The blonde closed his eyes and breathed deeply before exhaling the longest sigh of his life. I'm tired and I don't really want to get mad again, began the blonde carefully. Will I be mad if I ask about my dad? Hiruzen started, considered lying, made and discarded plans, threw a discreet glance at Dragon, who simply shrugged bastard and sighed. You'll be terribly mad, the Hokage simply said, internally cringing. He simply hoped Raymond and the jutsu would be enough to appease his anger for this. Naruto yet again threw his arms in the air in exasperation. Of course I'll be. The blonde stood and shook his head. Well, not today then. I need to blow steam off first. I'll go destroy a punching post, Gigi, and you'll pay for it. Training ground 3. The blonde whirled again, this time facing the door, and marched forth, intent on making good on his promise. Before a hand fell on his shoulder, the boy looked at Dragon. When you are done blowing off steam, gather your belongings and be ready to move out. Tomorrow morning you get a new flat and you begin a new life. The reality of his enrollment in Anbu came crashing down on Naruto, momentarily stifling the flames of his anger. The boy nodded once and Dragon released the vice-like grip on Naruto's shoulder. The blonde lost no time and stormed out of the office. Dragon looked at the small room. The boy had apparently not noticed, but he had leaked chakra. Lots and lots of chakra. His short, spiky locks had gathered to form 2 large appendages reminiscent of a rabbit's ears, much like the ears of the Kiwabi. But it had not stopped with just that. The tempest of chakra had wreaked actual havoc in the office. Books were strewn haphazardly on the floor, the floorboards where the boy had walked were scorched, and the chair he kept sitting on was ready to be dumped. Hiruzen sighed. We flirted with catastrophe here. Dragon shrugged. You did. The Anbu coughed and covered the curse his oldest friend fired at him. So, was that so difficult? The Hokage massaged his eyes. Less than I feared, more than I wanted. We rarely get what we want, Hiruzen. Only what we deserve. I know, Dragon. I know. I just wish I had never sown that kind of seed in the first place. We all do at least once, Hiruzen, whether by design or not. Naruto had run quickly to his destination and was now facing a wooden post. First, his grandfather had lied to him about not knowing who his parents were. Then, he had a very feeble explanation for hiding the truth for the first few years of Naruto's life. And then he had simply no excuse for the past few years. Or rather, he had a very hurtful excuse that amounted to I did not trust you. I thought you were too stupid to be trusted with a secret. The boy punched the wooden post with a vengeance and bark flew everywhere. His skin split open and bled, but it was of no consequence for the blonde boy. He healed far too fast for it to be a problem after all. Naruto was not angry because of that, no. Or at least only partially. Naruto was angry because when his grandfather had admitted to not actually having any valid explanation to support the need for the lie, had admitted he simply did not want to face the lie he had created, and that was not acceptable. Naruto had been told to ignore the scorn, to smile at the anger, to laugh at the fear, to make do with the neglect, to endure the hate. Naruto had done all that and then some, but when it had been the Hokage's turn to face his lie, Naruto's grandfather had turned tail and fled. The courage Hiruzen expected from Naruto, he did not even possess it himself. The boy kicked at the training post, sidestepped, threw a punch, withdrew only to step in again with an elbow strike. Pieces of bark and blood were flying everywhere, but Naruto did not care. The pain was keeping part of his mind busy and allowed the blonde to work through his anger. Naruto was angry, but above all, he was disappointed. Was that all the Hokage, the guardian of the leaf, amounted to? An old man who would sooner dig deeper and plant his head in the ground than admit to his mistakes and face the anger of a scorn 12 years old. The boy sighed and halted a self-destructing venting. The training post showed deep, barkless, fist impacts. The blonde's hands were bleeding despite the calluses. Was it worth it to stay angry? What for? Being angry was unpleasant, exhausting, and accomplished nothing ultimately. Being angry at something was akin to dwelling on it. Naruto shook his head. Naruto Uzumaki did not dwell on things. It was not his way. But doubt would stay at the forefront of his mind. He had no idea of the extent of the web of lies the Hokage had weaved around him, so Naruto would not trust so blindly again. And it would go for anyone. At least there was a lesson in all this debacle. A man could be old, wise, and a war veteran. At the end of the day, he was still a man. They weren't more trustworthy, they weren't above making mistakes, and they weren't necessarily brave. When Naruto left the training ground and went back to his rundown flat, his knuckles long healed, 2 cardboard boxes were waiting for him outside his door. One was labeled Keep and had a folded piece of paper inside, the other was marked Throw. Obviously, for his relocation, Naruto deduced quickly. The blonde took the piece of paper and read the message. Keep only what you absolutely want to keep. Discard the rest, especially whatever is orange. Dragon. Naruto sighed. It was not like orange was his favorite color or anything, and he did not pride himself as a fashion connoisseur, but people dissing the orange so gratuitously was unacceptable. Maybe he still had some of this superb orange dye with glitter. The blonde smirked. That would do perfectly, and Dragon would come to love orange, or learn to live with it at least. His smirk turned to a mischievous grin and Naruto rubbed his hands. He had a plan forming already. Anbu or not, he was going to have his fun. Satisfied with his decision, the blonde turned to unlock his door to find it open. Immediately, his brow rose along with his guard. A very untalented thief was out. Naruto had nothing worth stealing. An unannounced visitor would have waited outside for him. The blonde entered his hallway carefully, all senses in high alert, until he heard a slurping sound he was awfully familiar with. The boy sprinted toward his small kitchen living room. Hey, whoever you are, you don't touch my raimens. Seated around his table were 3 Naruto replicas slurping on Naruto's emergency cup. Raimens. Le boss, one exclaimed in between 2 mouthfuls. What do you 3 think you're doing? Roared Naruto in response. The 3 startled shadow clones all turned to the original. Eating raimens? Naruto face-palmed. You're clones. You don't need to eat. How do you know that? And ramen is good, retorted one clone, and his tone brooked no argument. Yeah, boss. And look how long we lasted. We're due some ramens. Naruto sputtered and flailed his arms around before he sighed. What did one answer to that? The original blonde was rubbing the back of his head when one fact hit him. How are you even inside? Well, we have the keys of course, answered one clone in a deadpan tone. Naruto frowned. Oi, I'm not kidding. If you broke the lock. Nah boss, we have the keys, insisted one, fishing for something inside his pocket and dangling in front of him what was indeed keys. We're copies, remember? Yeah, you're copies of me. Wait a second, exclaimed the original boy, his eyes wide in amazement. Naruto darted to the practice target hanging on his wall and wrenched a kunai out. Taking the knife in a reverse grip, the boy crossed his fingers and molded some chakra shadow clone jutsu. In a now familiar poof of smoke, a fifth Naruto holding a kunai in the same position as the original appeared. Wide-eyed, the boy took the kunai from his clone's hand, letting the real fall to the floor, and nicked the tip of his index finger with the knife replica. Holy flame! Naruto turned to his 3 ramen-eating replicas. This jutsu is amazing, Tebeo, the blonde whispered excitedly. The 3 clones respectively nodded, shrugged, and slurped noodles. Suddenly, Naruto flipped the clone kunai and hurled it toward his target. The knife bit in the wooden plank like any normal knife before poofing out in smoke, leaving a very real cut behind. Jaw slack, he turned again towards his clones. So I don't copy only myself but what I carry? The 4 clones made a show of thinking for a few seconds. Well, isn't that obvious boss? I mean, we appear with clothes, supplied the most recently created clone. Yeah well, that's because I pictured you all wearing some. I didn't want to beat Mizuki Tem naked, retorted the original. All 4 clones rubbed the back of their head, chuckling in an eerie chorus that would have been very embarrassing. The original blonde watched as his him chuckled in a synchronized manner. If it had been anyone else but him, he would have definitely been weirded out. Naruto shook his head. He had to test the limit of the copy. He had to test the ability to copy itself. In fact, what if he could duplicate only a kunai, for example? That'd be priceless on a mission if supplies were to run low, or just simply to make sure supplies would never ever run low in the first place. The boy nodded. He needed to reopen his manual on jutsu theory, the only theory book he would ever willingly open, with the one on sealing, and find some more advanced material. The Academy handbook was desperately thin. That would be the then. It was time for the now. Naruto ignored the fact his 4th clone was fixing himself a cup of instant ramen, the bastard, and turned to the 3 he had sent on a mission. The Hokage had revealed some stuff, but the boy was ready to bet there was more. So, what did you find? About Mom. The clones looked at each other and eventually one rose from his chair. You sent me to the archives, said the clone before falling silent. Naruto waited, but the clone was not speaking. And nothing boss. Nothing in what's accessible to a genin anyway. And before you ask, there are no other Uzumaki files in the public archives. The blonde muffled the curse and sighed. The old man had told him his mother had many enemies and had been a Jinchuriki before him, but what could necessitate bearing her identification file? People in Konoha, civilians and ninjas alike, were registered and had a file recording various information deemed important. Their birth, or the date of their move-in, their graduation from the academy if it happened, their wedding and their death were among the things that were noted. One could access the files, provided they had a valid reason. Looking for a family member was an acceptable request, but some files were considered too important to be publicly accessible and required signed permission from the Hokage Tower. After a case study, the blonde face palmed. He hadn't thought his mother was that much of a secret. Sliding his hand down his face, Naruto rested, cupped his chin and thought. The boy jerked his head up suddenly. You didn't think about looking for our own file, did you? With a bit of luck, if Naruto had reached this conclusion, his clone had done the same. To his dismay, the clone shook his head. He hadn't. I did, but there was nothing either. He had. Naruto sighed as his dismay increased just as the reason for it changed. He couldn't even access his own file, which, as far as he knew, was illegal. Fire Country had laws, Tebeo, except if his file was deemed an S-ranked secret, a state secret, one confirmed by the daimyo himself. The kind of secret only the Hokage or the daimyo could give access to. Naruto groaned. His life was a pile of secrets, and until yesterday he hadn't been aware of it. Or his file and his mother's were lost during the Kiwabe attack, but Naruto doubted that, for some reason. His mother's, that would have been believable, but his? Simply impossible, as the file, if it existed, would have been created simply after the attack, and it would have been too easy, and his life apparently didn't do easy. The boy wondered for a second if Dragon was in trouble for revealing the name of his mother. Considering the Anbu was still alive today, he was probably fine. Naruto was grateful for the tidbit of knowledge and did not want the guy, whoever was under the mask, to be punished for it. Maybe Naruto would not dye Dragon's stuff in glittering orange. After all, the boy focused on his two other clones. And the library? One of the clones shrugged. Not much on the Uzumaki clan. For all intent and purpose, it doesn't exist anymore. They ruled over a place called Azushiagakure, a small village. No idea where it is. They were known for their red hair and their finjutsu. The crest on Konoha's flak jackets is theirs. Red hair, muttered Naruto. It matches with what the old man told me. The boy rubbed his eyelids when another thought hit him. Why don't we have red hair? The boy asked his clones. Had the old man lied to him again? Cause our dad was blonde and we got it from him? The boy mulled over his clone's answer. Possible. So much secrecy, I don't even know if they are worth uncovering, sighed the blonde, mildly annoyed. Was it worth it? Good question after all. His parents were dead if the old cage were to be believed. His mother almost certainly was, at least. So what good did knowing about them do? The boy had no idea if he had any kind of legacy to uphold. Probably, given the number of secrets it was buried under, but was it a legacy he would want to uphold anyway? Being Kumo's boogeyman did sound cool, but Naruto wasn't sure it was supposed to be a goal in life. As I side thought, Naruto wondered for a second if his mom had left him some money behind but dismissed it. If the Hokage had taken 12 years to begrudgingly given him her name, it would take another 12 years before Naruto would see the money, if there was any. So what good did knowing do? Not much. And there were many things the boy wasn't sure he wanted to know. Not knowing was hurtful, but knowing for sure would not necessarily help. Not if the truth was horrible. After all, Naruto still had no idea if his parents had sacrificed him willingly or not to be a Jinchuriki. His grandfather's outcry at the idea that the fourth had killed them kind of disproved the theory, but the other was possible. His mother supposedly loved him. Was he the Jinchuriki only because he was the son of one? Maybe the clan heirs were not a viable alternative. What did holding a Biyu even mean and entail anyway? Naruto sighed. Was there a choice to begin with? And why, by the flame, had his status been revealed? If the Kiwabi rampage was a premeditated attack, why was the Hokage thinking about when he revealed Naruto was a Jinchuriki? That was just asking for someone else to attack again, in a time of grief and uncertainty at that. Naruto's eyes widened. Was he a bait? Did he even contain the beast? Or he didn't? His parents simply had been people whose faith in the village had been complete and blind. Much like the fourth's and his grandfather's had been before the villagers revealed they were assholes, treating one innocent little child who bore a demon inside him like the plague, even if said child had no say in the matter. Naruto grabbed the original kunai he had let fall on his floor and hurled it at his target. Practice. The knife split the wood and buried itself in the wall behind. The blonde was breathing raggedly. He did not want to be angry, but it did not mean he was not. To think he had longed for their acknowledgement. To think he still longed for it, in some way or another. The blonde sat back down on his sofa and exhaled before he breathed in deeply, holding the air inside his lungs, puffing his cheeks. Losing himself in conjectures was useless and didn't help, especially considering the current state of his temper. But what if? Arg! Curiosity is definitely the worst of humanity's flaw, screamed the blonde suddenly, startling the youngest clone. The three oldest only nodded, apparently not surprised. Feature set in a picture of seriousness. Yup. We came to the same conclusion, offered one. Yeah, finish your ramen and dispel, Naruto answered, waving his hand at them. Eating me? Asked the youngest, in between noodles. Especially you. The four clones nodded in unison and they hurriedly finished their ramens before dispelling. Naruto felt his left eye twitch and a weird pain throbbed behind his skull for a second. The blonde took a moment to consider the sudden headache. He had noticed the same thing happening after dispelling the little army of clones he had created to tenderize Mizuki. The pain had been head-splitting then and lasted for maybe a minute or two. He wasn't sure. He had ignored it because he was more worried about Iruka's wounds. Just now, the pain had been mild and it had already disappeared. Dispelling shadow clones somehow caused a headache, with intensity and duration related to the number of clones. Naruto nodded and took a mental note of it. He had to test it, or ask about it even. With a bit of chance, He wasn't the only one who knew the jutsu, or he was, because it was kind of supposed to be a forbidden technique. Naruto frowned. He had to ask his grandfather. He was loath to ask anything from the old man right now, but if someone knew about the shadow clone, it was the professor. He'd still ask his future Anbu colleagues first. Naruto shook his head and rose from his couch, asking himself questions he did not have the answers to in an exercise of pointlessness could wait. Right now, he had 2 boxes to fill. The sorting was quick. Naruto's possessions could be summarized to a pair of green goggles, a toad-shaped purse, his personal notebook about Finjutsu, and a collection of orange jumpsuits plus various other shirt and shorts he rarely wore nowadays. Most of the clothes were too small for him anyway. With a heart-wrenching sigh, the blonde dumped his jumpsuits in the biggest box of the 2, the one labeled throw. The boy cried fake tears for a minute in remembrance of his trusty, comfortable, warm during winter, cool during summer, all-around awesome orange garments. He then proceeded to try and see which shirts and pants were still fitting. Anbu or not, he'd probably need some clothes for civilian life. After maybe 10 minutes, Naruto was done with playing fashionista and was wearing a fresh green, short-sleeved shirt and a pair of cream-colored pants. The blonde observed himself in his bathroom mirror for a few seconds. Maybe the orange jumpsuit did do him a disservice, after all. With some civilian clothes neatly folded and away in the keep box with his goggles, his trusty nightcap, and his Finjutsu notebook, the boy gathered the rest. His soap, towels, pajamas, his academy manuals, with which had no idea what to do, and everything he had accumulated over the years, and it did not account to much, found its way in the throw box. Honestly, if Anbu was providing him with what he needed, there was no reason to keep bargain price stuff. Especially his towels. They were terrible, old, rough, and itchy. He really didn't like them. Naruto sighed at the sight of his empty flat. It was, hopefully at least, his last night he'd ever spend here. New job, new me. The boy chuckled tentatively. It felt dry on his tongue and bitter in his mouth. He had not been happy in this rundown apartment, but it was his apartment still. He had lived here for nearly as long as he cared to remember, because he did not care to remember what came before. Living here was unpleasant, but it was also freedom. A lonely kind of freedom, the kind of freedom which was absolute, without limit, and paid in full. No one to tell him when to go to bed, no one to tell him to do his homework, no one to tell how to eat properly, no one to explain his own body to him, no one to answer his questions. Naruto had to make do, somehow. Hopefully, the next place would have a little less freedom if it meant it was a little less lonely. The boy shook his head and wiped from his eyes the tears he refused to shed. He had no time for such depressing thoughts. Dwelling on them would not do him any good and would not change anything anyway. Naruto balled his fists and stretched his face in a smile. He was joining Anbu. He was going to become an awesome ninja. He was going to be okay. You called for me, Taishu. The individual who had just spoken was cloaked and masked, like all his peer. The mask he was wearing was in the shape of a tiger. The eye holes were underlined in red. It had 2 claw-like whiskers on each side, a crescent around the left eye and a flame under the right one, all in the same red color. Various other markings, of different colors, were also visible. Whoever was hiding behind the mask was a member of the 3rd company, the Bentaichu of an Anbu squad, a ninjutsu and close combat specialist, and a veteran of many campaigns. I did, Tiger, answered Dragon from behind his desk. Sit, the shadow added, designating a chair. Wordlessly, the operative obeyed and settled in front of his commander. Your squad has been lacking a member for a while now, Tiger. The soldier nodded. There was no need for an answer, apart from what politeness dictated, so the ninja went for a terse indeed. I do believe I have a potential recruit for you. The silent operative stood still for a second before he nodded again and inched forward slightly. Normally, recruits were introduced to their potential squad leader by the company's Zenteiju. For the commander of all Anbu to introduce the recruit directly was highly unusual. Not unheard of though. His name is Naruto Uzumaki, said Dragon. You might have heard of him, the commander added with mirth in his voice. Tiger nodded. Everyone and their mother knew Naruto Uzumaki. The Anbus were never tasked with catching the brat. It did not mean they did not know or hear of his exploits. Some of his traps were actually frequently discussed by the members of the recluse, as they apparently were downward vicious. Tiger had never interacted with the boy obviously, and he personally had no opinion on him. You know what he is, of course. The operative nodded once again. Everyone and their aunts, but not their children, New Naruto Uzumaki was the Jinchuriki, which was strange, as Jinchuriki were supposed to be trump cards and final weapons in wartime. Tiger shrugged internally. It had been revealed long ago and it was not his place to question the decision of the higher-ups. Tiger and his squad had had their fair share of the keeping individual Uzumaki safe kind of missions. "If I may, Commander?" asked the operative in a distorted monotone. "Go ahead." "What prompted his scouting?" "The facts he has quite the potential. He was the one responsible for the break-in and the momentaneous disappearance of the Forbidden Scroll." Tiger rose his brow discreetly, not that anyone would notice given his mask, and kept himself from whistling. "The boy was behind the breaking?" "It was impressive." "Impressive but not enough. The kid was barely genin. Not to mention he had kind of stolen the Forbidden Scroll." "He is no traitor, I can assure you," Dragon said as if reading the mind of a soldier. "In fact, he even helped uncover and apprehend one." "Alright, for a not even genin that was definitely interesting." "And he learned the Shadow Clone Jutsu in less than an hour." "I'm sorry?" asked Tiger slowly, his tone measured but with an undercut of skepticism. It seemed his hearing was failing him. "You heard me well, Tiger. He learned the Shadow Clones in an hour. He used self-developed Finjutsu-based Genjutsu to conceal himself during his break-in, got in the most insane way possible without choosing a shred of his chakra, and helped us catch a traitor. That alone is worthy of interest. But I've had the boy monitored for a while now and I can vouch for his potential," Dragon explained. The commander joined his fingers in front of him and rested his elbows on his desk. "You do not lead 20 Chunin on a 3 hours chase and virtually kill 17 of them by luck alone, Tiger." "Virtual kill?" "That is how we count the victims of those who fall in his traps during his pranks. Considering some Chunin trigger multiple traps, it's not even an accurate measure. If those traps weren't harmless, we would have a shortage of shinobi." "The Chunin could trigger the traps knowing full well they don't risk anything," remarked the operative. "No. Those traps, while not lethal, are nasty and they damage pride, clothes, and credibility. If the Chunin could avoid them, they would." "Could it mean some of our Chunin are in dire need of remedial lessons?" "That's not it either. We have observed and recorded the boy's process for setting traps and it's creative and vicious. He does not create a funnel that would easily be avoidable. No. He prepares a metaphorical minefield for his pursuers. And his traps are very elaborate." My observer reported the boy setting up traps within traps within traps. "He sometimes willingly triggers the first layer, lulling his opponent into thinking that's all there is and they fall for the second layer. And once they are out, the third layer activates." Tiger stayed silent for a second at the report. "He does sound promising," allowed the operative. "But it takes more to be Anbu. He is a hard worker, willing to learn, and extremely dedicated when interested. He just needs a guiding hand and someone to enforce discipline and control. And you would have that someone be me." "You and your team?" "Yes. For more reasons than one," Dragon said, his tone surprisingly gentle despite the distortion effect. "A team isn't complete without its fourth member." "I'm at your command, Dragon Teishu, but my teammates will probably voice a complaint." "It will be duly noted and ignored." "Naruto Uzumaki will be treated like any recruit and if the boy does not make the cut, he will be outed." "Very well, Teishu." "When do we meet him?" "I will bring him to you tomorrow at the beginning of the first rotation." "Hi. By your leave." Dismissed. The operator rose without a sound and exited the small office, leaving his commanding officer to his thoughts. Naruto was walking around aimlessly in Konoha. Above him, the sky was bright blue with nary a cloud to shield the people from a brightly shining sun. The streets were full of people doing people stuff. What that was exactly, Naruto had no idea. What did the people out in the streets do? Didn't they have a job to be at Chunin on patrol and older teams of genin doing chores? The blonde understood. But the civilians? Graduation took place in April, a week or so after the beginning of spring, just so newly minted genin team could learn the meaning of hard work, under the rising temperatures of Fire Country's warm spring and suffocating summer, by doing D-rank missions. The boy knew that because Iruka had told him once, in front of a bowl of ramen, that it was the hazing process reserved to genin. Also, it was explained during one of the academy class, the one on missions, or so Naruto remembered. Apparently, D-rank missions did serve a multitude of purposes but the blue-eyed boy had stopped listening after Iruka had said painting fences. The blonde had to admit, he was kinda glad he was joining the ANBU. It meant no D-rank missions in hot and humid weather. At least Naruto hoped it did. The boy did not know what to do. It was 3 in the afternoon, maybe 4, and Naruto had no idea how he was supposed to keep himself busy. He had to admit that excitement was slowly rising within him and alongside it, So was anxiety. Was he going to make the cut? TCH, of course he was. Tabeo. Whatever test they would throw at him, he would pass, with flying color to boot. Just like you flunked the academy exam 3 times, whispered all too sweetly a traitorous part of his mind. Naruto shook his head. No way he was going to flunk anything. He was Naruto Uzumaki and he was awesome. The words of dragon rung in his head. A ninja needs humility. The boy's head sunk before it shot up just as quick and he grinned. Naruto Uzumaki was relatively awesome then. And there was no way the Anbu test would be as stupid as the academy one anyway. It will be many times harder, asserted the annoying little voice in his head. Naruto sighed before he pumped his fist. Who was to say there was a test in the first place? They were interested in him because he had talent and hard work. Surely whatever he would be put through would take that into account. It would simply make no sense otherwise. Reassured and with a spring in his gait, Naruto resumed his walk, which was still very much aimless. It was at this moment his stomach growled very loudly. Naruto looked down and grinned sheepishly, his right hand rubbing the back of his scalp. He had had one measly cup of instant ramen before meeting with the Hokage dragon, and said meeting had been exhausting. Added to that was the fact Naruto had gone to punch a training post for an hour and the blonde was understandingly famished. It was time to pay a visit to his favorite place in Konoha. Here I come, Ikiraku. The blonde sped through the labyrinth formed by Konoha streets and ended up 20 minutes later in front of a little, unassuming, noodle bar. Ikiraku's ramen was inscribed in large red kanji on the flaps that half covered the entrance. There was a big paper lantern outside, greeting the nightly visitors with its warm light, lettered with the kanjis for one and comfort. Ikiraku. Naruto lifted one flap and greeted his 2 favorite persons in the world. Hey Tokyoji, hey Aimni. A man in his 50s with a fleeting smile, his eyes almost closed, and exuding bonhomie, turned to greet the enthusiastic blonde. Hello, Naruto. It's been a time. A time, meaning Naruto hadn't visited for something like a week. The boy rubbed his scalp. Yeah, had to work for my exam, Tokyoji. Oh yeah, that's right. How'd it go? Asked the kindly chef. Naruto hesitated a second before he remembered everything was a secret and settled for a short but efficient answer that would not have his first and only ramen provider executed. I passed, exclaimed the blonde, pointing at his headband. The cook smiled warmly and gave the boy a salute, tipping him his cook hat. Well then, Mr. Ninja, how do we celebrate that? Asked the man with utmost seriousness. With one miso ramen large with extra pork, Tabeo, answered the blonde with a blinding smile. One miso large extra pork common. Dad, is Naruto here? Came a distinctly feminine voice from somewhere behind the open kitchen. Hi. A young brunette with her hair kept back by a white kerchief appeared, garbed in a white kimono and blue apron and holding some cooking gear. Much like her father, she had a constant fleeting smile, but contrary to him, her chocolate brown eyes were open wide. Hello Naruto, she greeted with a large smile when she saw the blonde. How is my little brother doing today? Naruto pointed once again at his headband. Ninja Aim pumped her fist. Hell yeah. Give me 5, the young woman said, her open palm in front of the blonde. Naruto lost no time and promptly slapped Aim's open hand with his. High 5, said the boy with the same enthusiasm as his surrogate sister. Now children, careful, interrupted Tuki. We wouldn't want any accident to happen now, would we? Naruto and Aim chuckled, the blonde rubbing the back of his head. Tuki was referencing an older day when Naruto and Aim, both hyper for flame knew why, had wreaked havoc in the little restaurant. It was a day dating back to when Aim had not won her blue apron yet. Now, one miso ramen large with extra pork for you Naruto, said the cook as he slid a smoking bowl of edible goodness toward the blonde. Enjoy. Naruto nodded and inhaled the steam rising from the dish. The first time he had ever tasted ramen, he was a lost little boy trying to find his way in Konoha under heavy rain. He had fled from the orphanage this day, he did not remember why, and the light and the warmth spilling generously from the little bar had exerted over his young self the same fascination a flame did over a moth. The kindly old man had offered him a bowl of miso ramen after the kind older sister had helped him shower and change. He had not gone back to the orphanage. Instead, the Hokage had given him his flat. Since then, Naruto was a regular of Ikiraku's. Shaking his head to dispel the age-old memories everything had happened so long ago, Naruto broke his chopsticks and adjusted them in his right hand. Itadakumasu, the blonde exclaimed loudly before vacuuming the content of the bowl. So Naruto, you have to tell me how it went, said Aim excitedly over whatever it was she was doing in her kitchen. Magic, Probably. Naruto slurped on the noodles and chewed on them carefully. As good as they were slippery and could easily end up in the wrong canal. His mouthful gulped down. The blonde looked up at his sister in spirit. Well, nothing much. We got a boring written test, began Naruto. It all began as I jumped from the communication tower to the Hokage tower. Then some shuriken throwing. Pretty easy, the blonde continued. Then I made my way to the vault, escaping the vigilance of the patrolling Chunin. Then what was it again? Oh yeah, stupid genjutsu escape test, said the boy, scratching his chin. I picked a damn hard lock to pick in 4 minutes under the cover of self-made Finjutsu. To think Finjutsu didn't even give me extra credits, tch. Then we all had to demonstrate our taijutsu. Naruto kept on going. I then escaped with a very important scroll and fled to a little clearing where I learned one jutsu from the scroll. And to finish, the Academy 3, except this time I did not flunk the clone, finished Naruto brightly. To finish, I beat a traitor with my new jutsu and gave the scroll back. I probably saved Iruka-sensei and I learned I'm a Jinchuriki. The unofficial version definitely sounds more awesome. Though nothing would have happened if I had used my brain in the first place. That's so cool, Aim exclaimed, interrupting the boy's train of thoughts. Naruto smiled, thinking about dropping Ramen and going ninja. Nii-san? The older girl laughed before she pumped her fist, stars shining in her eyes. No silly. There is nothing that'd distract me from the holiness that is Ramen. Amen, provided Naruto, chuckling. Tch, insolent, threatened the girl, giving Naruto a mock glare before her smile returned. Anyway no, I'm not going ninja, but that won't stop me from finding ninja cool. And that's a mighty good thing. Who else would pick up the torch when I retire? Tuki joked from the side. It was 1 hour and 5 more bowls later that Naruto exited the little restaurant, his stomach full to the brim, a wide smile on his lips, happy to have talked with the man he considered an uncle and the girl he saw as a cousin. Even if he had to lie to their face. The blonde's smile faltered. Naruto's eyes hardened. Well, he was a ninja now. He had accepted the Hittite and fastened it around his head. He had claimed for so long he'd be a shinobi, and now that he was one, he had to act the part. And the businesses of a shinobi lay essentially with cheating and killing. He just really had not expected he'd lie so quickly to people he considered family at that. His life was complicated and he had chosen a complicated path. Or the path had been chosen for him, Naruto wasn't sure, and honestly, it did not change much in the grand scheme of things. Now if only he could find himself a bright, preferably neon-colored, orange board with a clear goal marked on it, that would be ideal. The previous one, with Hokage painted all over, had gone out just last night, and now Naruto threaded a path without much light to guide him. The boy sighed and rolled his eyes. Now he was philosophizing in the middle of the street with heavy use of metaphors. If he did not know Tuki had absolutely forbidden her to do so, the blonde would swear Aim had slipped some sake in his ramen again. Or maybe the noodles made him sentimental. How do I kill time again? Muttered the blonde. He had no time to set up a prank, and he did not want to stuff his brain with more Finjutsu nor risk some accident while experimenting with jutsu theory. It had been a long time since the blonde had, well, time, and time unoccupied made him dwell on questions that frankly weirded him out. Who are you? What do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? What in the flame were those questions? Tebeo. And just as he was going to enter Anbu at that, Naruto groaned. He really had to find something to do to distract his mind. A smile found its way back on his face as he spotted a small silhouette he knew well. 3 shadows were sitting around a small table. One was on the edge of a chair and the 2 others were resting on a couch. A small bowl of cashew nuts was at the center of the table. You called for us, Sarge? One of the shadows sitting on the sofa asked. Her voice was distinctly female. Young but not juvenile, not girly but without the rounder notes of maturity. A teenager. I did. The boss found us a recruit to break, answered the one on the chair. The voice was manly, deep but frozen in a monotone. Again? The first shadow whined. They keep sending them and they don't fit. We work well enough with 3. It might be the case, but a team is comprised of 4 ninjas, chided the first shadow gently, her voice warm and womanly. PFF, I know that. The first shadow answered again. Doesn't change the facts. He will be submitted to the same process as any recruit. If he doesn't fit, he takes the boot. The man interrupted with a note of impatience. Do not get your bra in a twist, he added with his voice back to his monotone. There were a chuckle and a laugh. It's supposed to be panties, corrected the woman, in a tone that told she hoped to be helpful. Yeah, Sarge, it's panties, Panties, laughed the teenage girl. I don't wear a bra anyway, she declared with mirth. I see. I will try to remember it. The man spoke in the same toneless voice, completely ignoring the girl's claim, which made her pout. Anyway, the boss was clear. This is non-negotiable, so prepare to give a newbie some hell. The two women shuddered. Their squad leader had most of the time a level of control on his body language and voice that bordered on psychotic, allowing only what he wanted to allow, and only when torture and training were mentioned did it slip outside of his grip. Also gardening, but that was neither here nor there. Alright, Banteju. When do we receive him? The older woman asked. Tomorrow at first rotation. So soon? The younger girl choked on cashew nuts. Do we know who he is? The man took a deep breath. That was where he knew the gears would truly grind to a halt. He mentally prepared himself and covered his eardrums in a layer of protective chakra. Naruto Uzumaki. The apparent silence took the man by surprise and he ceased to modulate his chakra just in time to hear the teenager's cry of protest. What? The squid is barely a ninja. The man winced slightly at the volume of the shout but said nothing, knowing his young teammate would express herself for a minute before he could speak. So the squad leader waited for the young girl to end her string of expletives. The fuck? Punctuated the teenager eventually, her breath coming short. I should wash your mouth with soap, young lady, commented the woman. PFF, whatever, cat. You're not my mom. The man rasped his knuckle on the table. Attention please, he asked in his unchanging monotone. Hi, this squad is under my command and as long as it's under my command, we will obey orders. The boss gave us the responsibility to haze the boy, we will haze the boy. And if we gain a teammate, all the best. TCH, as if. Don't dismiss the child before even seeing him, chided the woman. That isn't fair to him. Everybody has a fair chance to join. But he is just out of school, cat. He was in the same class as my idiot brother and he was second to last if not dead last. A severe bias toward Uzumaki has been identified in his teachers, explained the man evenly before his voice took a more forceful edge. And anyway, boss scouted him himself, so end of the argument. PFF. Fine. He won't make it anyway. We shall see. The spiky black hair gathered in a wild ponytail jutting out of the weird gray cap, the ever-growing blue scarf, and the yellow t-shirt with the leaf emblem on it belonged without a doubt to Konohamaru Sarutobi, antepenultimate youngest heir to the Sarutobi clan, son of Taiga Sarutobi, grandson of Hiruzen Sarutobi, honored son of the leaf. As someone close, or at least in theory, to the third Hokage, Naruto was familiar with the Sarutobi. They were nice people, if a bit distant but much less than the rest of Konoha. They weren't all as spontaneous as the Akiraku but they regularly had a kind word for him. They were probably the reason Naruto even tried. The blonde had played more than once with Konohamaru, much like Ichiro. Konohamaru's older cousin had played with Naruto. The blonde knew the honored son of the leaf well. Naruto chuckled silently as he neared the little 8 years old. The boy absolutely detested when people called him honored son of the leaf. The blonde skulked and closed in on his target. The young Sarutobi was being sneaky, meaning he was up to something. Naruto let his right hand fall on the younger boy's shoulder. Hey Ko. The answer was immediate and did not disappoint. The boy jumped, whirled, and screamed at the top of his lungs. Naruto laughed. Boss, don't do that. The young Sarutobi eventually exclaimed furiously, his dark blue eyes glaring at the taller blonde. Sorry, but that was too tempting and you need to keep awareness of your surroundings. Naruto answered in a learned tone. So, what are you up to? The boy suddenly grinned a grin that should not have been seen on the face of an 8-year-old and giggled. Naruto sighed. He knew this face well. It was kind of a Sarutobi family trait. Who's the victim this time? The blonde boy asked, vaguely amused. Kurenaiba. She made all the books disappear. Naruto gave the younger boy a sideways smile. He knew full well what books Konohamaru was talking about. They were small, orange, perverted, and generally disgusted. Kurenaiuhi Sarutobi, Konohamaru's aunt. And what are you going to do? Naruto asked, mildly curious. The boy rummaged in the folds of his scarf. Naruto could swear this thing was unnatural and brandished a pair of silk panties and an assorted bra. The blonde fought a slight blush at the sight of the rather brisk lingerie. She's with her friends at the dango place. I'ma run around with it on my head. The little boy exclaimed mischievously. You're so gonna die, deadpan Naruto. TCH, she'll need to catch me, assured the brown-haired boy. She's a jonin. Even I don't outrun them. Naruto retorted. Well, most of them, I don't. The blonde added as a second thought. Anyway, she'll catch you and I don't even want to imagine what she'll do to you. Konohamaru's smile faltered and the boy shuddered. Shuffling with his feet, The young Sarutobi looked down as if shameful. I didn't really think this through, did I? Naruto shook his head at the obvious conclusion. No, you didn't. So how do make it better? Asked the blonde in a tone that was eerily reminiscent of one a teacher would use during a lecture. Konohamaru replaced the lingerie in his scarf and took his chin in his hands. After a few seconds, the boy looked up at Naruto, his dark blue eyes asking silently for help. Alright, remember simplify the question. What's the goal? To embarrass Aunt Kurenai, exclaimed the Sarutobi. How? By showing her perverted lingerie around. What happens if she catches you? Konohamaru shuddered. She'll place me in one of her genjutsu. Can you escape by running? No. Then what's the question? Konohamaru pondered a few moments before answering. How do I keep her from moving? The boy hesitantly said. Naruto nodded with a bright smile. Good. Maybe I'll manage to do something with you. Now, what do you propose? A trap? Naruto nodded again, thoughtfully this time. A possibility, but again, she is a jonin. You'd need a damn strong trap to surprise her and keep her immobilized. Then, I don't know. Konohamaru slumped in defeat. The taller blonde boy grinned. Normally you'd be a bit young, but there is another tactic. The brown-haired child looked up hopefully. Another tactic, boss? A mischievous glint shone into azure blue eyes, an unsaid promise of fun and embarrassment. Have you ever heard the term shock and awe? The younger boy shook his head frantically, his mind already sold on the idea. Whatever it was, shock and awe sounded absolutely awesome. Remember my special hench? The Sarutobi nodded with stars in his eyes. Naruto had a special hench thanks to which he had stolen their grandfather's hat numerous times. Let's alter it a little, shall we? 1 hour later and the two boys were observing a certain dango shop from the low roof of a building across the street. Roof they had accessed thanks to Konohamaru's scarf. Unnatural, really, and were now camping on. When are they meeting again? Asked Naruto to his companion. Or was the boy his underling? Konohamaru did call him boss after all. They should be here anytime. No, hey, there they are, the Sarutobi answered in a shout whisper. And indeed, 3 women were settling down at the dango shop's terrace. One had long, flowing dark hair, peculiar red eyes, and a dress that frankly, Naruto could not explain. It was Kurenai, their target. Another, older by a few years, had spiky brown hair, fang-like markings on her cheeks, and was garbed in combat fatigues. A large dog. Naruto was certain it was more a wolf than a dog trailed behind her. Her name was Tsume Inuzuka and her presence meant they were probably discovered already. The last woman was a purplet as old as the first, her hair tied in a high ponytail. Her clothes could be qualified of open. She was Anko Mitarashi, the snake mistress. Naruto cursed silently. The Inuzuka and Mitarashi were trackers, meaning they would recognize their scent. The blonde balanced the pros and the cons of continuing with the prank and decided he needed the rush. Alright, we let them settle down and relax. That'll bring the guard down. You have the rest of the plan? Yes, boss. Remember, when you feel it, you relax. Yeah, I know. It's important, otherwise, it doesn't work and you are caught. A few minutes later, the 3 women were munching on a variety of dangos and drinking, sake for 2 of them, juice for the red-eyed woman. Suddenly, 2 nondescript boys approached their table. Before any of the ladies could say anything, 2 voice caroused in perfect synchronization. Sexy jutsu. A light puff of smoke later and before the flabbergasted women stood 2 very tall, quite muscular, and very naked men. One was a blonde, the other a brunette, and if one word was to be used to describe them, it would be hunk. They had chiseled muscles glistening under a perfectly tanned skin. Their hair were wild but in a very controlled kind of way. One was biting his lower lips in a suggestive manner while the other had a hand in his hair, flexing his biceps. Both were wearing a very risk set of lingerie. Red, laced, with small pearl and everything. A small trickle of blood rolled from Enko's nose as the woman eyed the 2 pieces of eye candy, a stupid grin on her face. Tsume just exploded in uncontrolled, loud laughter. And Kurenai, poor Kurenai, had recognized her newest set of lingerie, one she hadn't even shown her husband yet, and was inventing a new shade of crimson while trying, and failing, to not look at the 2 Adonis. Hello, ladies. A trickle of blood escaped Kurenai's nose, much to her horror, and it was at this moment she jumped. With blinding speed, she jumped on the 2 impudent boys. She was a married woman by the flame, prepared to slaughter them. They were already running at top speed. The Jonin gave chase, leaving behind 1 daydreaming Anko Mitarashi and 1 Tsume Inuzuka trying not to die from laughter. Naruto and Konohamaru, under the disguise of their sexy jutsu, were running as fast as they could. Naruto nudged the Sarutobi and winked. The other boy nodded and slowed down. Kurenai had quickly caught up to the two. They weren't fast enough to outrun a Jonin. She was preparing herself to give them a beating they would remember in their next reincarnation when the boys willingly stopped. The Jonin smiled wickedly. They had given up. Good era, Yuhi-san. How are you? One boy, the blonde, dared to ask. Kurenai cracked her knuckles. You're in for a world of pain, she fumed. But what for, Yuhi-san? Didn't you pay us to put the show? Asked the brunette cheekily. Kurenai simply punched him hard, and the boy disappeared in a puff of smoke. What? Bye, Kurenai-san, waved the blonde boy before he, too, went up in smoke. Wide-eyed, Kurenai whirled around once, twice, and then a third time to try and discover where the boys had gone. She was facing their last position, right in front of her, when she noticed a piece of paper floating in the wind. The woman snatched the note and opened it. Gotcha! Kurenai felt the red of anger color her cheeks. She had no proof, of course, but somehow this looked, smelled, and breathed like her nephew and his surrogate brother. Konohamaru Sarutobi, the Jonin roared. On the other side of Kanya, two boys, one blonde and the other a brunette, were panting heavily before they both started laughing hard, falling on their bottom. Ah, did you see her face? Ah, yeah. And when you said hello ladies, ah. It took 10 minutes before the fit of laughter the two boys were subjected to calmed panting. Naruto and Konohamaru looked at each other, wide smiles splitting their face. That was an awesome prank, boss. Thanks for the help. Naruto smiled. You're welcome, Ko. Hey boss, by the way, how did you do those bunshin? They were extra cool. And I didn't even know you could swap with a person. Naruto weighed the pros and cons of telling his younger brother that the substitution was actually a gamble brought forth by Jutsu theory. He knew it was theoretically possible. He had never practiced it. He had bet on the fact that a shadow clone being pure chakra, it would compensate for the complicated mass exchange. He had been proven right. He would need to look into it. Of course. I'm awesome like that. Naruto eventually chose to say Ko was his little brother. The blonde had to maintain a certain level of awe after all. You sure are, boss, said Konohamaru with stars in his eyes. Right, answered the blonde, eyeing the sky. The sun was setting. Alright Ko, that was fun, but you should run to Maji and to Dan. You need your alibi. You got it, boss, the Sarutobi said, rising from his sprawled position. Dusting himself a bit, Konohamaru threw a look at his big brother. When do you visit? Naruto pointed at his forehead. Well, I'm a ninja now, so what the hell? How did I not notice that? Exclaimed Konohamaru furiously. I'm sorry bro. Well done. Naruto waved him off. That's okay Ko, you were focused on the prank, which is good. A constant focus is half the success of a prank. Anyway, gonna be a bit busy but I'll find the time for sure. The younger boy smiled brightly. That's so cool bro. So cool. I can wait to enter the academy in autumn. Naruto returned the smile. Work hard and you'll get your headband in no time. Maybe even quicker than me, thought the blonde. Hee. I'll do my best boss. I don't doubt it. Now Shu, go find the rest of your core. Sure. Konohamaru nodded with enthusiasm. Sayal boss. The young Sarutobi whirled and readied himself to depart when Naruto's call stopped him. Oh Ko. The brunette boy turned back. Yeah boss. Thanks for the prank. I kinda needed it, Naruto said gently with a fond smile. Konohamaru blinked twice and shrugged. He had never seen his boss like that. Sure thing bro. Anytime. The Sarutobi hesitated. Anything else? Naruto's small smile turned into a grin. Nah. You're free to go. The younger boy nodded and sprinted off, leaving Naruto to his devices. It took a minute for the blonde to stand up. The prank, the rush of the chase, and the laughter had cleared his mind from all the stupid questions. They would come back, obviously. Naruto knew that, but right now he felt lighter. Slowly, the blonde walked back to his flat. It was only 6:30 but the sun was already very low. It was still only the beginning of April after all, and while the days were steadily getting longer, the night was still quickly there. Naruto loved Kanya in the evening. The streets were full of people who would glare at him, were he to dare walk among them, but he enjoyed it nonetheless. From the roofs, more often than not, the evening was when people would end their working day and get out to enjoy the pleasant warmth of the breeze. Dressed in their finer garments, people discussed with their neighbors while the kids played happily. Masters of various craft gathered in bars to drink fancy wines while their apprentices did much the same but with simpler, cheaper beer. The air was filled with spicy fragrances of slowly cooking food that would be ready in 1 hour or so, waiting to be eaten, and for the more carefree citizens, Stands sold food to go. The paper lanterns hanging above the streets were set alight and bathed all in a cozy light. Each evening, Konoha was a festival Naruto had never been welcome to take part in, of course, but even from the roof, it was a sight to behold. It was probably for the Konoha evenings that Naruto had not fled to some unknown part of the world, where people would look at him normally. He knew that were he to depart, he would miss the evenings because he was certain no other place in the world could compare. Probably. And Naruto was not petty, at least he liked to think he wasn't. The laughter of the children, the warm greetings of the neighbors, the food waiting and simmering in a big pot, even if he hadn't really enjoyed all that, and to a certain extent he had, thanks to the Sarutobi and the Akiraku, it did not mean no one was allowed to enjoy it. Konoha owed him big time, but it did not mean they were forbidden to live and be happy. Naruto would gladly fight if it meant protecting the evenings in Konoha or something like that. Munching on a skewer of something, Naruto reached his apartment. When he opened his door, the boxes were magically gone and a note was pinned to his dining table. His heartbeat rose slowly as he took the note, mounting excitement making it go awry. Tomorrow at 4 in the morning. Dragon. Naruto tightened his fist, breathed in deeply, and took a hearty bite of his brochette, finishing it. Yosh. Tomorrow was a new day and tomorrow was a new life. That's the end, guys. If you enjoyed, then make sure to leave a comment. This is Chaos Shinobi signing off.